Hey truckers, here is part 2 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Sword Armor. When a person encountered an unexpected surprise, it was very easy for them to have an abnormal emotional state. Imagine if a wanderer from the alternate world who had been running around all day to fill his stomach was suddenly informed that he had obtained the special level resident qualifications of a powerful building. That surprise would definitely make this wanderer go crazy. Tangjin was already so excited that he was about to go crazy. He had risked his life in Building World to get a small number of low-level brains. But now, there were at least hundreds of level 3 and above brain beads really placed in the box in front of him. Hundreds of brain beads above level 3. It was extremely difficult to get so many of them. For Tangjin, this meant nearly 1,000,000 gold coins. He could finally roar, "I'm finally free from poverty." No wonder his cell phone kept vibrating and he couldn't stop it. It was actually because of this. Compared to Tangjin, this cell phone seemed to have a greater desire for the beads. Holding a handful of beads in his hand, Tangjin smiled until he was about to suffocate. After calming down, he immediately counted the number of beads excitedly. He was smiling the whole time. During this period, his expression would change every time he counted a bead. After counting the beads, Tangjin placed it on the table and looked at the large pile of beads in front of him with a slightly stunned expression. Among this pile of brain beads, there were 450 level 3 brain beads, 50 level 4 brain beads, and 10 level 5 brain beads. In other words, they were worth a total of 1.9 million gold coins. This was an extremely shocking number for Tangjin. It was a number that he didn't even dare to dream of in the past. Now, it was time for him to absorb everything. Tangjin roared in his heart. Then, he saw these brain beads slowly disappear in front of his eyes. Then, his personal information displayed a 7-digit balance. Tangjin looked at the series of numbers and felt like he was looking at a mountain of gold. However, at this moment, a caption suddenly popped up in front of him. The gold coin balance exceeds 1 million. The system has automatically entered the first upgrade. The time is 72 hours. Please wait quietly. Before Tangjin could recover, the words in front of him had already disappeared. The projection that he had gradually gotten used to disappeared, as if it had never existed. Tangjin was a little unaccustomed to his normal vision. Tangjin took out his cell phone and took a look. As expected, the cell phone had been switched off. The troubled Tangjin put down his cell phone. At this moment, he felt a sense of loss. After all, this was the thing that changed his life. Now that it was going to level up, Tangjin's heart was filled with anticipation. He wondered what it would be like after it leveled up. Would there be more magical applications in the application store that was already very powerful? After hiding his cell phone, Tangjin turned his gaze to the table. There was a bead on it that he had placed alone. This bead looked extraordinary. Compared to the other beads, there was an additional faint halo around it, making it look extraordinary. And it was indeed not simple. See check out LTSTVL on novl/bin.cm. This was a level 6 brain bead that only Lord-level monsters could have. It was worth at least 1,000,000 gold coins. Thinking about the horror of Lord-level monsters, one could tell how valuable this bead was. It was definitely priceless. At the same time, the Lord-level brain bead was also one of the necessary items required to establish a high-level building. From now on, as long as Tangjin obtained another cornerstone, he could establish his own building in the alternate world. He had searched high and low for it, only to end up finding it so easily. As he gently played with the Lord-level brain bead, one could imagine the emotions in Tangjin's heart. After carefully putting away this bead that concerned his dream plan, Tangjin turned his gaze to the other items in the box. Tang Jin first picked up the short sword at the top and examined it carefully. The total length of this short sword was about 45 centimeters. It had a purple sheath and a hilt of the same color. Its appearance was simple. With a gentle pull, the short sword was unsheathed. Tang Jin heard a soft sound being emitted, and then a purple-black sword body appeared in his eyes. Light flickered on the purple sword. It was actually a strange translucent crystal with strange runes engraved all over it. This short sword was like a pool of water rippling, looking a little agile. Just by looking at it, one could tell that it was extraordinary. With a light slash at the wooden chair beside him, Tang Jin was shocked to see that the heavy wooden chair was actually sliced in half by the sword. In fact, he didn't use much strength, but the short sword itself seemed to have a power that turned the chair as soft as tofu. Or perhaps it could emit an invisible sharp aura, and it was because of this aura that the chair was easily cut open. No matter the specific reason, he had picked up a treasure. With such a divine weapon, wouldn't it be easy and fun to slash the zombie monster like rubber? After playing with the short sword for a while, Tang Jin, who was still not satisfied, turned his gaze and stared at the black robe. In fact, this dress was not a robe, but a costume similar to a combination of leather armor and a cloak. It felt extremely comfortable, light and smooth, as if one was touching soft skin. Tang Jin held it in his hand and looked at it carefully. He discovered that there seemed to be countless patterns hidden in the black soft cloth. They seemed to be runes, or some strange combination of patterns. In short, they looked mysterious. Holding this robe in his hand, Tang Jin vaguely felt that there was a mysterious power flowing in this cloth. After thinking about it, Tang Jin took out the sharp purple short sword and slashed the corner of the black robe. He didn't expect that the sharp short sword that cut wood like tofu actually failed to cut through the fabric of the black robe. At the same time, the sharp-eyed Tang Jin also noticed that when the short sword streaked across his clothes, the pattern in the black fabric seemed to flicker. There seemed to be a faint membrane of light blocking the sharp blade of the short sword. He tried to stab the black robe with the short sword again, but it was still unscathed. Tang Jin was really shocked this time. This black robe's defense was so strong. After carefully putting away the black robe, Tang Jin checked the black leather armor inside and guessed if it also had terrifying defense. It was unknown what kind of beast skin the black leather armor was made of, but it was also extremely comfortable to the touch. There were even patterns engraved on the surface, and its appearance was unique and beautiful. On the two elbows of the leather armor were 4 black metal wrist guards that were buckled together. Tang Jin, who was filled with anticipation, was disappointed this time, because in front of the purple short sword, the black armor was actually extremely weak. He easily sliced off a small piece of it. Tang Jin was a little disappointed, but looking at the cool design of this leather armor, it must be expensive. He could wear it and show off. At the thought of this, Tang Jin put on the leather armor. It fitted him pretty well, making him look very powerful and domineering. Tang Jin got in front of the mirror and made a few poses. He accidentally touched a bump on the metal wrist guard. It was the eye of a monster. Swoosh! After a sharp sound, Tang Jin saw a black light fly out of the wrist guard, instantly shooting a small hole in the mirror in front of him. A black hole also appeared on the wall behind the mirror. When he bent down to take a look, he actually penetrated the wall. Tang Jin was shocked by this sudden situation. He looked at the small hole in the wall in a daze and then looked down at the wrist guard on the leather armor. Only then did he completely realize that none of the items in this box were simple. Black Rock City sending troops. After realizing this, Tang Jin's attitude towards these items immediately changed and he became serious. He began to study this leather armor carefully. His hard work paid off. After about 3 hours, he finally understood the strangeness of this leather armor. It had to be said that the black leather armor was a treasure not inferior to the purple short sword. Up-to-date OVLS on OVL-bin.cm. Its own defense was very ordinary, only slightly better than ordinary leather armor. The magical thing was its two wrist guards. There was a mechanism on the wrist guard on his left arm. As long as he pressed hard on the mechanism, a black steel bullet would be shot out. This steel bullet was the length of an index finger, and its penetration power was extremely shocking. There were 5 steel awls hidden in the wrist guard. After retrieving them, it could be pressed in and used again. He could actually hide 5 life-threatening steel awls in such a thin wrist guard. Tang Jin wanted to see what mechanism was so domineering and exquisite. Unfortunately, the wrist guard was built seamlessly, and he couldn't dismantle it at all. The other wrist guard could shoot out a hidden sword. It was also very sharp. Although it couldn't compare to the purple short sword, it still contained the element of surprise. In all fairness, the weapon hidden in this wrist guard was indeed very lethal, and it also had the advantage of concealment. However, for Tang Jin, who had a storage space, it was actually not too important. As long as Tang Jin was willing, he could take out anything from his storage space at any time. It was far more convenient and secretive than the weapon in the wrist guard. The only thing that made him happy was that if the 2 wrist guards touched each other, they would produce a magical rising power. This power gave him a magical feeling that made him feel as if he was as light as a swallow. It was as if he had lost 2/3 of his weight. It turned out that Tang Jin wasn't hallucinating. After activating this power, he almost broke the roof after jumping gently. This room was more than 3 meters tall, but Tang Jin's head still hit it. After careful consideration, Tang Jin leaped gently and actually raised nearly 2 meters high. If he erupted with his second-level extreme strength again, Tang Jin would probably be able to easily jump to the balcony on the 3rd floor. Unfortunately, this fleeting feeling could only last for a minute. If he wanted to use it again, he would have to wait at least 3 hours. Although there was a time limit to using this power, it was still a rare treasure. The current Tang Jin far exceeded ordinary people in both strength and speed. Now that he could jump higher and further on this foundation, he was naturally very happy with it. In that case, this leather armor and cloak would be his battle suit in the alternate world. Only then would these items be used to the fullest. There were also a few rolls of leather paper in the box. They were filled with words and patterns that Tang Jin didn't know. Tang Jin studied them for a while but didn't have any clues, so he put them aside. When he picked up the glass bottle that had the thickness of a thumb, Tang Jin felt his wrist sink. It turned out that the weight of this glass bottle was extremely shocking. Tang Jin shook it with his hand. It was estimated to be nearly 2 or 3 kilograms. It was such a small thing, but it was so heavy. There must be a mystery inside. Tang Jin looked at the black liquid in the glass bottle with a thoughtful expression. Tang Jin couldn't tell what was left, so he stopped looking at them carefully one by one and collected them together. When he encountered people who knew their stuff in the future, he would ask them to help appraise them. After doing all of this, Tang Jin sat quietly at home and waited for the system to restart. However, before that, he still locked the door outside the courtyard tightly before jumping over the wall and getting back into the house. This way, he could create the illusion that he wasn't at home. He didn't want to be stopped by the police who came to check the water meter while he was waiting at home. Building World, in the Wanderer Town. Qianlong walked in from outside the cave. After looking at Big Bear playing with the little girl, he said to Murongxian, "It's been a few days, but there's still no news of Brother Tang. There won't be any problems, right?" Murongxian shook her head and smiled. "There shouldn't be a problem. Didn't he ask us to wait here? Then we'll wait quietly." Qianlong nodded and sat down with a smile. Brother Tang is a very capable person to be able to get so many good things. To be honest, after meeting Brother Tang, I felt like I've come across a tycoon and am eating well every day. Murong Xian smiled when she heard that and nodded in agreement. Yes, his aura is very special. He's not like other wanderers at all. Tell me, who exactly is Brother Tang? I don't know. I'm actually even more curious than you. Just as the two of them were chatting, a commotion suddenly came from outside. Qianlong frowned and quickly rushed out of the cave to take a look. About half an hour later, Qianlong ran in with a cold expression and said to Murong Xian, "The situation is a little bad. I heard that a black wild building appeared not far from here, and there are many powerful guardian monsters. However, for some reason, thousands of monsters suddenly ran out of the protective range of the wild building. Along the way, they captured monsters and wanderers everywhere. Now, these wild monsters are rushing in the direction of the Wanderer town." According to experience, Qianlong could tell that the monsters this time were very aggressive. If this situation continued, the Wanderer town probably wouldn't be able to hold on. Once the monsters broke through, they would definitely not let the people here go. That way, Murong Xian and the others would be in danger. In Qianlong's opinion, Murong Xian was Brother Tang's woman. Since Brother Tang wasn't here, he had the responsibility to protect his brother's woman's safety. Therefore, Qianlong suggested to Murong Xian that they move immediately. But in the vast wilderness, where could they hide? Everyone was a little worried for a moment as they kept thinking of countermeasures. However, everyone's worry didn't last long, because soon, news came, and it was good news. In order to deal with the sudden monster riot, Black Rock City sent an elite cultivator team into the wilderness to eliminate the monsters. They definitely couldn't allow them to do whatever they wanted in the range controlled by Black Rock City. At the same time, Black Rock City issued a bounty. As long as one killed a zombie monster of the corresponding level, they could exchange for the corresponding reward as long as they brought the monster's specific organs to claim it. The rewards given by Black Rock City were very rich. After killing a level 2 monster, the bead on its head would belong to the person who killed it. Moreover, this person could also receive a reward equivalent to a level 2 bead at the mission distribution point of Black Rock City. It was equivalent to receiving double the gains. When the zombie monsters were cleaned up to a certain extent, Black Rock City would send high-level cultivators to clean up that wild building and completely deal with the disaster. As soon as this news was out, the originally panicked wanderers immediately calmed down after hearing the announcement from Black Rock City. Although they didn't know why the usually high and mighty Black Rock City was so abnormal this time and actually took the initiative to send troops to clean up the monsters, this was a good thing no matter what. Not only that, the wanderers also planned to form teams to hunt zombie monsters. After all, it was already very good to have double the income. The wanderers were overjoyed. The crisis seemed to have disappeared because of the order from Black Rock City. From this, it could be seen how famous Black Rock City is in this region. Advanced technology in the App Store. After all, Black Rock City was a powerful faction. It would naturally do what it said. Early the next morning, the gate of Black Rock City opened wide, and cultivator teams appeared in front of the wanderers. This was the first time the wanderers had seen the armed forces of Black Rock City mobilize on a large scale, so they naturally came to watch. The members of the Black Rock City's cultivator team were wearing black standard leather armor and using unified swords and weapons. They advanced in an orderly manner and were grouped into teams, looking very imposing. Their auras rose. Occasionally, when their gazes landed on the surrounding wanderers, they were all filled with disgust and disdain. As residents of Black Rock City, they naturally had the right to despise these wanderers. This time, Black Rock City sent out 100 teams made up of 500 cultivators. Each team consisted of 5 members and they were all above level 2. Coupled with the cooperation of the Wanderer exploration team, the moment they came into contact with the monsters, they quickly and effectively stopped the monsters' rampage and controlled it within a certain range of the wild building. However, during this period, at least 1,000 wanderers had been abducted by the zombie monsters. It was unknown if they were dead or alive. As soon as they fought, it could be seen that the battle was going to be difficult. New N0VEL chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/CO/M. The next evening, another piece of news came. The Black Rock City team and the Wanderer exploration team seemed to have encountered trouble. A large number of zombie monsters suddenly surged out of that wild building. Among them were many tall and powerful monsters, and even cavalry-riding monsters. The monsters whose strength had increased greatly counterattacked, causing the caught-off-guard Black Rock City cultivators and Wanderer exploration teams to suffer considerable casualties. As soon as this matter spread, some people realized that this wild building was probably not simple, because those zombie monsters seemed to be different from ordinary monsters. On the morning of the third day, it was said that Black Rock City had sent an elder to supervise the battle. This elder's cultivation had reached the peak of level 5. He was only one step away from becoming level 6 and mastering the mysterious power. During the battle with the monster, that elder had once killed his way into the wild building. However, soon after, he vomited blood and ran out. According to the onlookers, this elder who spat out blood had a very frightened expression. He rushed back to Black Rock City without a word. 2 hours later, several messengers from Black Rock City rode their horses and sped away. The direction they chose was actually the direction of the other buildings within 100 miles. Black Rock City's action immediately triggered the guesses of the various factions nearby. Those who could have a faction in this wilderness were all people with strong martial strength and outstanding intelligence. Black Rock City's abnormal behavior made them smell a trace of danger. But before that, they still had to wait and see. In the original world, in Tangjin's house. After cooping up at home for 3 days, Tangjin finally relaxed completely. At this moment, he was lying on the bed and playing with his iPhone in boredom. The sudden feeling of having nothing to do made Tangjin very uncomfortable, so he tried his best to find something to do as soon as possible. He had just placed an order on the internet and bought a few heavy crossbows. After counting the number of days that had passed, Tangjin felt that the cell phone upgrade should be over soon. He was still looking forward to what new functions would appear on the upgraded cell phone. The cell phone that seemed to be inconspicuous had already become his powerful tool. The waiting process seemed to be extremely slow. After several hours, Tangjin's cell phone suddenly vibrated slightly. Then, the cell phone's screen quickly lit up. The cell phone was activated very quickly. In just 3 seconds, Tangjin saw a new interface and a set of words. Tangjin only took a look at the introduction before cursing. What the hell? The cell phone system has been upgraded. Its performance has improved greatly. It can run 10 applications at the same time. The application store has been upgraded and many new applications have been added. This upgrade cost 1 million gold coins. It has been automatically deducted. More than half of the 1 million gold coins that he had risked his life to get were actually directly deducted. He was simply baffled. Did they ask him for permission? How can they just make the decision for him? Tangjin wanted to cry but had no tears. He could only swallow this depressed feeling with tears in his eyes. At the same time, he comforted himself that there were still more than 900,000 left. It was still not a small amount. The application store has been upgraded. Please check it yourself. Heh, of course. He knew that it had been leveled up even without being told. Tangjin complained with a depressed expression. He opened the application store and took a closer look. Then, his eyes lit up. The upgraded application store became much more refreshing. The categories of applications were now super technology, entertainment life, war support, and fantasy secret skills. Projection, quantum invisibility screen, and other applications that had been downloaded previously were categorized as technology. At the same time, there were several technological applications that were strongly recommended. Electromagnetic pulse bomb, destruction radius 1 kilometer, download price 10,000 gold coins. Holographic projection clone, can at most create 5 projection clones. It's super realistic. The download price is 20,000 gold coins. Transformation plugin, can help your cell phone change its appearance into items such as watches and collars, making it convenient to carry and hide. The download price is 1,000 gold coins. Monster Detection Comprehensive Plugin, a combination of infrared night vision, X-ray vision, smell, sound waves, high-speed camera capture, and dozens of other super awesome functions. Promotional download price of 200,000 gold coins. Super Electric Shock, can release 1,000,000 volts of high-voltage electric current from afar. Effective distance of 3 meters, download price 100,000 gold coins. All-purpose driving assist device, with it, you can even pilot a spaceship. The download price is 50,000 gold coins. Tangjin took a quick look at these apps. It had to be said that many of the apps inside had already tempted him. In the end, he gritted his teeth and bought the cell phone transformation plugin and monster detection plugin. The gold coins were immediately reduced by 201,000. However, Tangjin's heart didn't especially ache as these two things were worth it. There were also many entertainment options, but Tangjin didn't plan to invest the precious gold coins in it, so he only took a few hurried looks at the introduction. The war option had also updated many extremely powerful applications. In the past, Tangjin was poor and could only look at it for fun. Now, it was different. He had money, so he naturally had to spend it well. Magnesium explosion, simulating the strong light produced by the burning of two substances. It can instantly blind the opponent. You have to pay attention to protecting yourself when using it. The download price is 3,000 gold coins. All-purpose data battle interface, includes comprehensive information needed in battle. At the same time, it is compatible with other applications and plugins. It can display the user's various physical indexes, weapon index, attack damage index, enemy data, and so on. The download price is 200,000 gold coins. Adjustable neural organ infrasonic generator. There are 2 modes to choose, corresponding to different targets. When used, it can protect the user. The download price is 100,000 gold coins. Miniature death ray, efficient, light, and astonishing lethality. It can carry out super long-range attacks. The download price is 100,000 gold coins. Super telescope, can distinguish external objects 100 kilometers away. The image quality is clear. Includes mouth-type resolution and laser eavesdropping plugin. Audio is also obtainable. Download price 5,000 gold coins. Radio wave interceptor, can automatically search for and intercept radio waves in the air. Automatic decryption, automatic lock. Download price 1,000 gold coins. Tangjin looked at the advanced technology-like applications in the war category and drooled. After considering it for a long time, Tangjin chose the all-purpose data battle interface, adjustable neural organ infrasonic generator, magnesium explosion, and a small application called the all-purpose electronic tool bag. It contained wireless cracking passwords, wireless storage data, 100 large storage spaces, and many other functions. Tangjin spent more than 200,000 gold coins on war applications. In this way, Tangjin only had about 500,000 gold coins left. Tangjin cast his gaze at the application of the Fantasy Secret Skills category, which included application options for storage space. Pretending to be a ghost to scare people. There were many seemingly scary applications of Fantasy Secret Skills. Spirit Body Searching Machine can scan the spirit bodies in the range of settings and indicate the strength of the spirit body's energy and the type of spirit body it belongs to. Costs 20,000 gold coins. Mysterious Text Cracker can automatically crack any text that belongs to the mysterious energy system and analyze the meaning, translating it into words that the user can recognize. Treasure Map Index contains picture text information of 880,000 natural treasures, including the possible location, environment, effects, usage, and storage method. The download price is 50,000 gold coins. Common Magic Arrays Introduction introduced general knowledge of magic arrays, the principle and construction of simple arrays, entry-level knowledge, download price 100,000 gold coins. Elemental Shield Generator can mobilize spatial-free elemental energy to form different types of shields. The defense strength can be adjusted according to the output range. The download price is 450,000 gold coins. Tangjin closed his eyes in pain. He wanted to download every app here. After thinking for a while, Tangjin finally spent 500,000 yuan to upgrade the miniature storage space to a level 1 storage space. Level 1 storage space is 5 cubic meters. The internal space shape can be adjusted. Download price, 500,000 gold coins. After upgrading the storage space, Tangjin's 950,000 gold coins were basically all spent. Tangjin was very open-minded about this. After all, he had once suffered the pain of lack of money, so he had a rational attitude of both love and hate for money. He could just earn more of it after spending it all. He had obtained many good things from the Zombie Lord. In addition, he had downloaded many advanced technology applications from the application store. Tangjin's current battle power could be said to be off the charts. However, when he thought about how he would have to face that terrifying zombie lord directly after teleporting back and bearing its anger, Tangjin's lofty aspirations that had just risen withered. No, he had to think of a way. But when he thought of the terrifying strength of the lord-level monster, Tangjin rubbed his head with a headache. Just as Tangjin was feeling worried, his super hearing made him suddenly hear someone standing at his door, talking softly. Listening carefully, the content of the conversation was actually about him. "Is it here?" "That's right, boss. This is his house." "Well, the door is locked. He might not be here, or he might be hiding inside. Little Wu, jump in with Little Wong to take a look." "No way, Captain Sunday. This wall is filled with glass wedges. How are we supposed to jump over it?" "Cut the crap. It'll be fine after you put this cushion on it. Hurry up and work." Analyzing the content of the other party's conversation, Tangjin couldn't help but sneer. It looked like the other party had already come looking for him. He didn't provoke anyone, but others came to provoke him. In the end, he was the one who was unlucky. If he had encountered such a thing in the past, Tangjin would definitely charge forward in anger and demand an explanation. However, the current Tangjin was different from before. He couldn't be bothered with such things. After walking out gently and closing the door, Tangjin activated the quantum invisibility screen. He quietly found a place by the wall and stood there, staring at the wall like he was watching a show. Soon, on the red brick wall, a short-haired young man popped his head out. After glancing at the situation in the courtyard, he climbed up the wall and prepared to jump down. Tangjin suddenly felt like being playful. He estimated where the other party would land and quickly picked up a bucket full of accumulated rainwater and moved it there. "Ayo, what the hell?" The young man in the air watched helplessly as the bucket suddenly appeared and he sat on it. "What's wrong?" As the young man screamed, two more men immediately rushed up from the wall. They glanced at the situation in the courtyard nervously. One of them was actually holding a pistol. However, when they saw the situation in the courtyard clearly, the older man couldn't help but curse. "I say, why can't you do anything right? How did you manage to fall into a bucket just by jumping over a wall? Moreover, you're screaming like you're a pig being slaughtered. I thought you had been stabbed." The other young man couldn't help but laugh. He pointed at the young man who was covering his butt in the courtyard and was drenched all over. He laughed and said, "Haha, that's what you get for jerking off all day. Now you have poor eyesight. In such a big empty space, you actually managed to fall onto a bucket. You're so blind." The young man holding his butt had a bitter expression. He thought to himself that when he jumped down just now, he didn't see the bucket at all right? But suddenly, this bucket appeared. What the hell? The older captain's son was also a little speechless as he looked at the two new brats. He coughed lightly and pointed at the door. "All right, little Wu, hurry up and enter the room to take a look. Little Wang, you go in too." The young man called Little Wang agreed. He climbed up the wall with a smile and jumped down. However, before Little Wang could land, Captain Sun and Little Wu heard a tearing sound. The three of them were stunned at the same time. Then, they saw Little Wu, who was covering his butt, turn around and look at the confused Little Wang in a daze. Then, he laughed out loud and pointed at Little Wang. "Ha ha. You were laughing at me, but look at you now. Your flower-patterned boxers are all exposed. Ha ha ha." In the end, Little Wu almost rolled on the ground laughing. Captain Sun was speechless. Little Wang, who felt a chill down his spine, couldn't help but look down. His face immediately turned red. His pants had already been completely torn open, and the little underwear revealed looked extremely enchanting. "Damn, this is so humiliating." Little Wang wailed in his heart. "Damn it, how did this happen? He was just jumping off a low wall, why did he end up tearing open his pants?" He quickly tightened his pants and looked at Captain Sun and Little Wu, who was already laughing. As the culprit behind the tear in Little Wang's pants, Tang Jin also had a hard time holding in his laughter. Captain Sun was a little helpless. He could only jump in himself. "Look at the two of you. What else can you do? Train well when you go back. With such a big commotion, even the dead will be woken up. If the suspect has a weapon and tries to resist, you'll suffer." As Captain Sun lectured, he reached out to open the door. Just as his finger touched the door suddenly bounced towards his face like lightning. Captain Sun was shocked. With the agility trained by his many years in the police world, he barely dodged the door and reflexively pulled out his pistol. "Whoever's inside, listen, I'm..." Before Captain Sun could finish speaking, he felt his butt being kicked fiercely and he plunged into the room. Who kicked me?" In the blink of an eye, Captain Sun, who had already seen the situation in the room, walked out of the room aggressively and roared at Little Wang and Little Wu. New N0VEL chapters are published on N0V/E/LBIN/co/M. "No. It wasn't me." "It wasn't me either," Little Wang and Little Wu hurriedly said. They didn't want Captain Sun's anger to descend on them. Although Captain Sun was usually quite easy to talk to, the elders in the team knew that this master was like an active volcano. When he erupted, it was simply world-shaking. However, as they explained, their eyes were filled with confusion. Because they had clearly seen it just now. Before Captain Sun, who had taken out his gun, could finish speaking, he seemed to have been kicked from behind and fell on his face. Captain Sun was furious. He pointed at the two of them and cursed, "There are only the three of us in this courtyard. It's not you, nor is it you. Could it be a freaking ghost? Do you think it's possible for a ghost to appear in broad daylight?" Captain Sun had an angry expression. This was too ridiculous. He had to teach these two guys a lesson later, or else they would turn the world upside down. "You too." Before Captain Sun could finish speaking this time, he saw Little Wang and Little Wu looking at the shadow in the corner in horror. Their faces were pale. Captain Sun turned around in confusion and his scalp immediately exploded. In the shadow of the corner filled with moss and junk, there was a person wearing a strange black robe but without a head jumping on the spot. That person seemed to be unaffected by gravity. With a light tap of his toes, he jumped nearly 2 meters straight up. Then, he slowly landed and jumped up again. "A ghost!" The three men shouted at the same time. The headless figure seemed to be shocked and disappeared without a trace before it landed. "Damn, this place is simply haunted." This time, it was Captain Sun who spoke. He took a big stride forward and jumped onto the wall with extremely agile movements. Then, he jumped out without hesitation. Little Wang and Little Wu were so scared that their hands and feet went limp. They didn't care if their buttocks hurt or not, or if their pants were torn open. They cried for a long time before crawling out in a sorry state. Then, there was a hurried car roar that quickly disappeared. In the corner, Tang Jin removed the quantum invisibility screen. He was wearing the leather armor cloak and walked out with a sly smile. Border City, 1. After scaring the three people who came uninvited, Tang Jin finally vented the anger in his heart. Every debt had its debtor. Speaking of which, the three of them were a little wronged. They came here to do normal work, but Tang Jin didn't care about this. Moreover, he was also wronged. It was not like anyone cared about that. He believed that for a long time, the three of them would have nightmares when they slept at night. On the other hand, if the guy who provoked him still refused to let him go after being sent to the hospital, Tang Jin didn't mind teaching him a lesson. For the current Tang Jin, it was simply too easy to do something that required violence to solve. Just as he sent away the three frightened men, Tang Jin's cell phone suddenly rang. It was his new cell phone that he had just bought. As for the original mutated cell phone, after activating the transformation plugin, it had already become the necklace on his neck and was carefully protected. He glanced at the caller ID. It was Su Feng. "Hello, Tang Jin, the matter is settled. Bring the money. Let's meet at the high-speed toll station in the afternoon." After the call was picked up, Su Feng only said a few words before hanging up. After lunch, Tang Jin saw that it was about time, so he took a taxi to the meeting place the two of them had agreed on. When the two of them met at the highway toll station outside the city, Su Feng had long parked his Land Rover beside the highway and was blowing smoke rings into the sky in boredom. After seeing Tang Jin come over, Su Feng rolled his eyes angrily and said sarcastically, "You're really something. You have to provide for your sister's school fees and repay the debt for that damn father. Why? Can't you take it anymore? Are you trying to take a shortcut to earn money like other people? Firearms and explosives are dangerous things. Let me remind you, if you want to run away, do it now. It's best if you don't touch something like this." Tang Jin was a little touched. With Su Feng's usual personality, it was obvious that Su Feng treated him as a brother for constantly reminding him. At the thought of this, Tang Jin no longer played dumb. He patted his chest and promised Su Feng, "Don't worry, I definitely won't use these things to do anything illegal. Do you trust me now?" Su Feng spat. "Like hell I do." Tang Jin took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. After taking a puff, he looked at Su Feng and said slowly, "What I've been busy with recently is quite dangerous. As for what I'm doing, I won't say, so don't ask. Perhaps I really won't be able to come back one day. When that happens, just pretend that I've never existed in this world. I've always treated you as a brother in my heart. If I'm really gone, I'll leave my sister in your care. If she suffers, I won't let you off even if I freaking become a ghost." Tang Jin's expression was very serious. After all, this sister was his only concern. However, this time, Su Feng didn't say anything. He just nodded with a serious expression. Then, he took a deep look at Tang Jin and started the car. After Tang Jin sat in it, Su Feng drove the car and passed the toll station and got on the highway. Along the way, Su Feng stepped on the accelerator and pushed it all the way down. After passing car after car, he was getting closer and closer to his destination. The car drove north and gradually approached the border river of the Federation. Soon, it drove into the downtown area of the small town located on the border. There were very few cars on the riverside road here. From time to time, foreigners could be seen driving past on ships from afar. There were even girls from the Icefield Alliance with proud figures lying naked on the beach to sunbathe. Tang Jin had been here twice, so he was not unfamiliar with the environment here. He was also very satisfied with the delicacies here. After driving for a few hours, the two of them were already hungry. They simply drove to a local restaurant with a good reputation. The renovation of the restaurant wasn't luxurious, but business was booming. The two of them entered the store and first asked for a private room. Tang Jin entered the bathroom and happily washed his face. When he came out, Su Feng had already ordered a few special dishes from the restaurant. Tang Jin took a look at the menu. It was nothing more than mushrooms, wild vegetables, and river fish stew. It was refreshing and practical to eat. The two of them were already hungry. They asked for 2 bowls of rice and wolfed it down. The rice was soft and springy, and it tasted extremely good. After having eaten some food, they each got a bottle of local beer and finished it in one go. At this moment, the waiters had already served the dishes one after another. The two of them chatted as they ate. Soon, they had already finished 2 cups of beer. Rubbing his bulging stomach, Tang Jin got up and went to the toilet. When he returned, he saw 4 to 5 tall and strong men sitting near the table. All of them had scars and tattoos on their faces, and they looked murderous. However, at this moment, they were all friendly and frequently toasted Su Feng. Seeing Tang Jin enter the private room, everyone turned their attention to him. Su Feng even smiled and waved his hand to introduce, "This is Tang Jin, my good friend." As he spoke, he pointed at the few burly men wantonly. These few are brothers who live nearby. In the future, if you come here to do something, just look for them. The few of them immediately replied with humility. Even though they were pointed at by Su Feng, they still smiled and took the initiative to shake hands with Tang Jin. After a few words of praise, everyone became familiar with each other and kept clinking glasses. However, Tang Jin also noticed something. These few people were clearly not kind people that were not easy to talk to. However, now, they were clearly deliberately pleasing Su Feng. After seeing this situation, Tang Jin couldn't help but be curious about Su Feng's current identity. Although the two of them could be considered brothers and Tang Jin also knew that Su Feng's power on both sides of the law wasn't small, he wasn't too sure about the specific extent. Since Su Feng was unwilling to mention it, he naturally wouldn't keep asking. Tang Jin's alcohol tolerance was originally not bad. After absorbing the bead and mutating his body, his physique suddenly increased a lot, and his alcohol tolerance also increased greatly. At this moment, he had already finished 20 bottles of beer, but his expression still didn't change, making everyone praise in unison. Although there were also people who could hold their liquor well and could also finish the same amount of beer, it was very difficult for one to become this tolerant to alcohol in a short period of time. From this, one could tell the level of their alcohol tolerance. The people of the North had rough personalities, and it was best to get closer to them by drinking together. At this moment, seeing that Tang Jin was so magnanimous and had an extraordinary relationship with Su Feng, they all thought highly of him in their hearts. These guys were all famous and powerful locals in the vicinity. Their ambitions were extraordinary, and ordinary people weren't able to impress them. After drinking another round, the night had already passed by. It was already 9 the next morning when Tang Jin woke up. After stretching his numb arm, Tang Jin washed up and pulled Su Feng out of bed. This guy drank as much as him last night and was still lying on the bed playing dead. After Su Feng came out of the hotel's guest room cursing, the two of them went out to get a simple bite. Su Feng made a call during this period. Then, the two of them rode Su Feng's car out of the city and headed straight for the deep forest along a gravel road. Returning to Building World. Located at the border, the natural environment of Jinyuan City was relatively good. 80% of the area under its jurisdiction was filled with primitive mountain forests. The trees here were mostly coniferous forests and white birches. From afar, they looked connected and spectacular. It was said that there was a huge fire in the forest one year. The people who lived in the deep mountains were surrounded. There was no place to hide from the fire, because there were burning tall trees everywhere. In the end, only by crawling into the culvert by the roadside could they escape. Traffic was inconvenient in most places in the mountains. The deeper the mountains, the fewer people there were. Some places needed satellite phones to maintain communication with the outside world. Especially in winter, if they didn't use shovels and bulldozers to clear the snow, the roads buried under the snow often couldn't be opened until April or May in spring. The road that the two of them walked on was relatively flat. Often, heavy cars that carried logs and rocks would pass by. As the saying went, one relied on the mountains for food and the rivers for water. In the early years of Jinyuan City, the fishing and forestry industries were developed, producing carp and high-quality wood. They had once contributed a lot to the construction of the country. In the later stages, when resources were exhausted and the fishing industry withered and the logging of trees was controlled, the locals had to adapt. They showed their abilities and used the surrounding mountains and rivers to farm, travel, and process wild vegetables. Because of this, many people became rich tycoons. The local rich people all owned a few houses in the local area as well as the southern coastal province. Every year, they flew around like migratory birds. Although the scenery on both sides of the road was not bad, looking at it for a long time still made one feel tired. Tang Jin and Su Feng chatted casually to kill time. Finally, they arrived at their destination after a bumpy journey. This was a place with lush vegetation, revealing a primitive appearance. After jumping out of the car, Tang Jin took a deep breath at the waterfall on the cliff in front of him. He turned around and praised Su Feng, "You're really something. You actually found such a paradise. If it weren't for the fact that I couldn't bear to leave the colorful world outside, I would really want to come here to live in seclusion and retire." Su Feng looked like he had seen a ghost. Living in seclusion doesn't seem to be a life that a commoner like you can tolerate, right? I'm afraid that in less than a month, you'll cry and shout that you want to leave, right? Tang Jin smiled in embarrassment and didn't refute. He knew his own character very well. He definitely wouldn't abandon the world and live in seclusion. Su Feng was very familiar with the environment here. According to him, he had come here to fight bears before. One of the bears was even bigger than a big water buffalo. It didn't stop breathing after being shot more than 10 times. In the end, it was still stabbed to death with a wild boar spear. The two of them walked along the gravel path covered in weeds. They kept taking turns the entire way and finally stopped in front of a wooden house built with logs. It was said that the wooden house in front of Tangjin didn't have a single nail, but it looked rather sturdy. After looking at it for a while, Tangjin couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. At this moment, the door of the wooden house was pushed open, and a young man with very high cheekbones walked out. This person smiled when he saw Su Feng. Then, he waved and let the two of them enter the room to talk. "Hello, young Master Feng. Long time no see." The young man spoke rather stiffly, clearly not used to communicating in Mandarin. The decorations in the room were very simple. Most of the furniture was made of wood. A brick bed was placed by the window. On the brick bed were a few small items made of birch bark. It had a very primitive and natural charm. At this moment, there was no one else in the room other than the three of them. Su Feng went straight to the point. "All right, stop dawdling. Hurry up and take out the things. We're rushing back before dark." The young man didn't hesitate when he heard that. He turned around and took out a long cloth bag from a cattail mat. After unfolding it, the things inside fell out. Tangjin focused and saw that it was a semi-automatic rifle and a shotgun. Tangjin went forward to take a look happily. He was surprised to discover that the 5 or 6 rifles were well maintained. There were no obvious injuries on the surface, and the gun oil had not dried up. Even the rifling was very clear. There was a silver-gray bayonet that was flipped upside down at the muzzle. It was the famous weapon of the Chinese army the three-edged bayonet. This bayonet had already been sharpened by the blade. The 3 blood grooves and the tip flickered with a dangerous light, making it obvious that one would definitely die after being stabbed by it. For such an old gun that had been out of the factory for 50 years, it was very rare for it to be so well maintained. It seemed that the owner of this gun was also a person who loved and understood guns. Tangjin was very satisfied with this. The shotgun should be Russian. Tangjin couldn't recognize the model. In the paper box beside the gun were 7.62 caliber rifle bullets and some loose bullets. There were roughly more than 300 rounds. Coupled with the pistol he already had, he should be able to use it for a while. Tangjin was naturally very satisfied with this rifle, so he simply nodded and said, "These guns are not bad. I want them. Where's the explosives?" The young man glanced at Su Feng when he heard that, and his expression seemed to be a little hesitant. Seeing this, Tangjin directly opened his backpack and took out some money. When the young man saw the money, he turned around and took out a plastic bag from a nearby hole. After opening it, various detonator fuses were revealed, as well as a tube of TNT wrapped in a yellow oil paper tube. Tangjin roughly counted. There were more than 40 tubes. "I got these detonators and TNT from the gold company in the past. The gun and explosives are a total of 50,000 yuan. The young man pushed the plastic bag over. Tangjin didn't hesitate and directly took out 5 stacks of money and handed it over. The transaction was completed after the young man checked that there were no mistakes. Since their goal had been achieved, Tangjin and Su Feng didn't stay any longer. They directly drove away. As they had brought contraband with them when they returned, the two of them simply didn't stay in Jinyuan City anymore and directly drove all the way home. After entering the city, Tangjin and Su Feng separated halfway. Su Feng continued to complete his hunt, while Tangjin hurriedly returned home and put everything he needed into the storage space. With these things, Tangjin had a plan for how to escape the room in the wild building. After returning home, Tangjin packed up a little and combined the TNT he had bought. The young man from before had already given Tangjin guidance, so it didn't take long for him to make a simple bomb. After thinking about it, Tangjin felt a little worried, so he made a few more and placed them in the storage space. After putting on the leather cloak and opening the quantum invisibility screen, Tangjin took a few deep breaths and resolutely activated the teleportation. Before his vision recovered, Tangjin felt a strange smell floating in the air. When he carefully distinguished it, it was a thick bloody aura that just would not dissipate. The last time he escaped, there was no such smell, so Tangjin's vigilance increased again. Roar! Before Tangjin could adapt to the dark light here, he heard the roar of a zombie monster. At the same time, he felt as if a monster was pouncing at him. Magnesium explosion! Tangjin's reaction was extremely fast. He instantly activated the app he recently downloaded. In an instant, extremely dazzling light erupted from where Tangjin was, illuminating the area of the room. Explore new levels on nvelbai.com. At this moment, Tangjin's other application, the all-purpose data battle interface, came into play. The strong light in front of him was quickly filtered out, allowing him to see the scene in front of him clearly. It was precisely because he saw the scene in front of him clearly that Tangjin couldn't help but curse. Damn, am I using cannons to kill mosquitoes? At this moment, at the exit of the room, 10 huge zombie monsters were densely packed. Every one of them had strength above level 4. Zombie Centurion, level 4 monster. It has extraordinary strength and is violent and bloodthirsty. It can use simple martial arts. Its weakness is the back of its head. Although they were a little panicked by the explosive light, unfortunately, these zombie centurions didn't completely rely on their vision to locate their prey, but on their perception of aura. Ordinary zombie monsters couldn't sense Tangjin's aura, but these zombie centurions could. This was also why as soon as Tangjin appeared, these monsters quickly locked onto him and were about to swarm over. What Tangjin didn't know was this was partly because he had stolen that box. Moreover, many things had happened in the past few days, causing the zombie lord to strengthen the safety defense measures of the wild building. The 10 zombie centurions could resist hundreds of ordinary wanderers without being at a disadvantage. In addition to the heavy defense outside, the zombie lord was confident that no one could break in. Out of caution, it also set up a warning measure in the room where Tangjin had disappeared. The corpse demon lord specially instructed its subordinates to immediately kill anyone who triggered the alarm he had set in this room. The zombie centurion who rushed into the room with various weapons in hand seemed to be ready to turn him into meat paste in the next second. Seeing this, how could Tangjin dare to stay? Without hesitation, he waved at the monsters and threw the bomb in his hand. Then, he teleported away again. Blood Pool and Zombie King clone. It had only been a few seconds since Tangjin's aura appeared and disappeared. With the abnormal teleportation ability and magical applications of his cell phone, he had the capital to act wantonly in the alternate world. The group of zombie centurions didn't see Tangjin himself. They only sensed an unfamiliar aura that didn't belong to the zombie monsters and prepared to clean it up as usual. Unexpectedly, after a strong light, the unfamiliar aura disappeared, leaving behind a smoking thing. A zombie centurion pinched this thing curiously, brought it in front of its eyes, and sniffed it. After smelling it, it seemed to think that the smoke coming out of the fuse smelled very good, so it sniffed hard again. When the zombie centurions beside him saw this, they immediately approached curiously. Then, these zombie centurions started staring at this smoking little thing intently. For the zombie centurions who were several meters tall, this thing that was not even the size of their palms was indeed a little thing. The fuse was very short. At this moment, it had already burned to the end. Then, there was a loud bang. A violent airflow and huge sound wave erupted from the inside of this little thing, blowing these huge zombie centurions away. Perhaps it was because these zombie centurions were too strong, but Tangjin's bomb actually didn't even kill a zombie centurion. Instead, the zombie centurions were only crippled. The sudden explosion immediately caused the interior of the wild building to be in chaos. The roars of the zombie monsters rose and fell. Even the zombie monsters outside heard the roar, but without the permission of the zombie lord, these low-level zombie monsters didn't dare to enter the wild building at all. Just as these zombie centurions were in chaos, Tangjin appeared in the room again. Sensing the power of the explosion, but knowing that he had yet to kill them, Tangjin couldn't help but sigh. The bodies of these zombie centurions were really strong. The bomb he had just thrown used a total of 200 grams of explosives. The 10-meter range was enough to kill all creatures, but it still couldn't take the lives of these zombie centurions. Could it be that after the monster entered level 4, they would become extremely difficult to deal with? It was better to avoid trouble. It was better to leave this place as soon as possible. With the cover of the quantum invisibility screen, Tangjin quickly activated the light body technique on his leather wrist guard and rushed out of the room almost without touching the ground. The moment he rushed out, Tangjin had the urge to cry. It was really not easy. The hall in front of him was in a mess. Broken items were everywhere. The injured zombie centurions rolled around on the ground. Those who weren't injured weren't much better. The shock wave from the explosion made them dizzy. They were dizzy and probably wouldn't recover for a long time. They didn't notice Tangjin's appearance at all. If Tangjin overestimated himself and took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, he might very well encounter the desperate counterattack of the zombie centurions. Compared to the powerful physical body of the zombie centurion, his weak body might not even be able to withstand a heavy blow from the zombie centurions. In that case, it was better not to take the risk. Tangjin thought about it and was about to quickly escape. However, when his gaze swept to the huge statue not far away and saw the scene below the statue, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He had just taken a step forward when he stopped. In Tangjin's memories, there should have been a black altar there, but now that he looked again, the black altar was no longer visible. The black altar didn't disappear. Instead, it was drowned by a huge blood pool built with dense corpses. When Tangjin saw this scene, he immediately understood. No wonder the smell of blood here was so strong. Looking at the area of the blood pool, who knew how much blood was needed to fill it? In the corpse walls surrounding the black altar, the broken corpses of monsters were strangely glued together by a red substance, as if their flesh and blood had grown into one. Tangjin roughly estimated that such a huge blood pool needed at least thousands of monster corpses. Tangjin was happy to see monsters killing monsters. However, when Tangjin saw the heads of the wanderers floating in the blood pool, an unknown anger surged into the sky. Damn it, these damn beasts! Tangjin gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with a terrifying cold light. He really couldn't tolerate humans being killed so unscrupulously, even if this was an alternate world. It didn't matter even if these wanderers were completely unrelated to him. It was difficult for him to see injustice like this. Find EU chapters. Tangjin didn't know what the use of the blood pool built by the zombie monster was, but it didn't stop him from wanting to destroy this damn thing. Once this thought appeared, Tangjin couldn't extinguish it anymore. With a thought, another bomb appeared in his hand. He would destroy everything with a bomb and make the zombie monsters work for nothing. But just as Tangjin was about to throw the bomb, he was surprised to discover that something seemed to be placed on the black altar in the blood pool. It was floating in the pool of blood. What the hell is this? It's actually soaking in the blood pool? Tangjin was puzzled. Before the lightness skill disappeared, he immediately rushed to the edge of the blood pool. The dark hall couldn't affect his vision. With a scan of the data battle interface, he saw the item on the black altar clearly. However, this item was a little unimaginable. It was the corpse of a young wanderer. His figure was perfect, his muscles were filled with explosive power, and his face was extremely handsome. Now, his body was placed in the center of the altar, completely naked and soaked in blood. The contrast between blood and flesh was so obvious. However, what made Tangjin feel strange was that 8 blood-red blood vessels were deeply stabbed in the young man's head and heart. It looked very disgusting. These blood vessels slowly squirmed like intestinal walls, connecting to the 8 statues around the black altar. On the 8 black statues, there seemed to be something like weeds growing on them. After passing through countless heads, they plunged deep into the blood pool. These root-like things also slowly squirmed, as if they were absorbing something from the blood and heads. The young man's body was covered in strange runes. As the blood-red pipe continuously inputted the shimmering substance into his body, the strange runes flickered and flickered with a dark red luster. Tangjin stared intently at the young man's corpse. He had a faint feeling that this should be a very evil ritual carried out by the zombie monsters. At this moment, a caption suddenly appeared in front of him. The monster detector had activated. Zombie King clone, immature body, the clone of one of the 8 zombie kings of the zombie race from an unknown small world, a level 4 monster. Through the cultivation of the blood pool ritual, after maturing, it can be a temporary body used to host the zombie king after the zombie king's soul descends. Its physical body is strong and perfect, and it is invulnerable to physical attacks. The flaw of the immature body is that it is vulnerable to soul attacks. Tangjin saw the introduction on the screen and was immediately shocked. It turned out that these zombie monsters weren't wild monsters, but from an unknown small world. Just like him, they could be considered transmigrators. Especially the corpse in front of him. It was actually a clone cultivated for the zombie king in that unknown small world to prepare for the future when its soul descended into this world. Apart from killing and destruction, these zombie monsters couldn't do anything good. Perhaps they would turn everyone into zombie monsters. If that was the case, how could Tangjin survive in this world? Damn it, you're snatching business from me. You're tired of living. A cold light flashed in Tangjin's eyes, and killing intent immediately rose in his heart. In that case, he definitely couldn't let the other party succeed. Soul Descent. The Zombie King clone was very powerful. It was only a level 4 immature body, but it already had an abnormal defense that was invulnerable to physical attacks. Once it was cultivated, wouldn't the Zombie King's soul be even more abnormal if it entered the body? No, he had to destroy it completely before it became mature. However, Tangjin was at a loss as to how to destroy the Zombie King clone. The monster detector had already explained that this Zombie King clone was invulnerable. Even if he took out that incomparably sharp purple short sword, he might not be able to hurt it at all. Even a level 4 zombie monster centurion couldn't die in a violent close-range explosion, let alone a Zombie King clone. The monster detector had already indicated that if he wanted to hurt this monster, he had to use a soul attack, but he didn't have any soul attack methods. If he needed to use a soul attack, did it mean that the Zombie King clone that had yet to host the Zombie King's soul already had its own soul? Tangjin frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, his expression lit up as he quickly opened an app on his cell phone. There were 2 modes to the adjustable neural organ infrasonic generator. The 2 modes were meant for different targets and had a different hertz for each mode. Looking at the introduction in the app, Tangjin narrowed his eyes. He had specially checked the principle of the infrasonic wave previously. The vibration frequency of some frequency infrasonic waves were similar or even the same as the vibration frequency of human organs. It was very easy for these sound waves to resonate with human organs. This kind of resonance from the outside world was very harmful to the human body. It could cause an extremely serious burden on the human body, causing organs to deform, shift, and even break. It could even kill the other party. The advanced technology in the application store was naturally not simple. Its lethality far exceeded ordinary infrasonic weapons. Its efficiency and death rate were extremely high. This was like a caged tiger. If this thing was used in the original world, it would undoubtedly cause a terrifying disaster. This thing was useful for humans, but he didn't know if it was also effective against this Zombie King clone. Tang Jin hesitated for a moment, but his eyes narrowed in the next moment. Forget it, he would give it a try first. First, he locked onto the target and set it to the automatic capture and analysis mode to determine the frequency that could affect the Zombie King clone. Then, it continued to attack in a fixed direction. Just as Tang Jin activated the infrasonic wave generator, a sound wave that couldn't be heard by human ears attacked the corpse in the blood pool. Fortunately, this advanced technology could customize its attacks and protect the user. Otherwise, Tang Jin might have been hit without anyone knowing. Seeing that the infrasonic weapon was operating, although Tang Jin couldn't hear it, he silently stared at the Zombie King clone in the blood pool, wanting to see something to happen. Unfortunately, after waiting for half a minute, nothing happened. Tang Jin sighed in disappointment. It looked like even infrasonic weapons were helpless against the invulnerable Zombie King clone. But even if he couldn't destroy the clone, he still wanted to blow up this blood pool. Even if he only ended up delaying the cultivation period of the Zombie King clone, it would still be a blow to the zombie race. Just as this thought appeared in Tang Jin's heart, he suddenly discovered that the Zombie King clone in the blood pool actually squirmed slightly. Then, a trace of blood flowed out of the corners of the Zombie King clone's mouth. Thick bloodlines appeared on the surface of its perfect body. Even the private parts of its lower body were bleeding. Haha, it worked! Tang Jin was delighted when he saw this and prepared to continue attacking. However, at this moment, Tang Jin felt a faint oppressive aura in the air, making it difficult for him to breathe. His hair stood on end, as if there was an extremely ferocious pair of eyes looking at him through the endless void. The gaze in those eyes seemed to want to cut him into pieces. This feeling made Tang Jin extremely uncomfortable. He struggled hard before breaking free from this nightmare-like feeling. At this moment, he vaguely discovered through the map's perspective that a blood-colored thread seemed to have stretched out of the void and pierced into the forehead of the Zombie King clone. 7 sit envelb/n. C/m for L test vels. Before he could take a closer look, the Zombie King clone lying in the center of the black altar had already instantly opened its eyes, revealing a pair of blood-red eyes. Tang Jin, who was observing the blood-colored thread, directly met the gaze of those blood-colored eyes. Boom! Tang Jin felt his mind go blank as he stood rooted to the ground. What a terrifying pair of eyes. Tang Jin only took a look and felt that he had fallen into endless fear. At the same time, a scene from his cell phone suddenly appeared in front of him. It was a world completely formed by the zombie race. Everything there was withered, not a blade of grass grew, and the aura of death and corruption was everywhere. In this abandoned world, countless zombies lived. Members of the zombie race were once creatures of this world, but because they angered the legendary god, the vitality of the entire planet was destroyed, but their corpses never decayed. Later on, for some reason, these immortal corpses developed intelligence and had the ability to cultivate and advance. They called themselves the zombie race. In the endless years, these zombies fought and killed each other. In the end, 8 great zombie kings were born, each ruling their own area. The zombie monsters that entered the building world were subordinates of the Spirit Brain Zombie King. In fact, the Spirit Brain Zombie King had mastered the method to enter this world from a secret text found in some ancient ruins it accidentally discovered. Because of the mysterious power of this world, any guest from another world who entered this world would form a brain bead in their mind, lose their original consciousness, and become a monster member of this world. This power was extremely powerful, and even the Spirit Brain Zombie King couldn't resist it. As long as its main body entered this world, no matter how strong it would inevitably become a monster in the end. The Spirit Brain Zombie King had found the only way to bypass this, which was to use the body of the natives of this world to nurture a clone. Then, its soul could descend and board. Then, it would command the army to plunder the resources of this world and turn all the creatures in Building World into zombie slaves. The Spirit Brain Zombie King used countless resources and great power to send these zombie monsters into this world. He also managed to retain the consciousness of the Zombie Lord for a short period of time. This way, the Zombie Lord and its subordinates would be the advanced team and start to build the altar. Then, they would nurture the Zombie King clone and prepare to welcome the descent of the Zombie King's soul. In the box that Tangjin stole last time, there was a drop of the Zombie King's blood essence that could be used to nurture the Zombie King clone. After the box was stolen by Tangjin, the Zombie Lord without the Zombie King's blood essence could only use its own blood essence to replace the Zombie King's blood essence. However, the Zombie King clone cultivated was far inferior to the clone cultivated by the Zombie King's blood essence. Just as Tangjin saw this, he felt a pain in his head. Then, the continuous images disappeared. Humph. A familiar snort sounded in Tangjin's ears, but it made his chest involuntarily tighten and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The infrasound generator suddenly closed forcefully, and his body involuntarily fell into the blood pool. I can't believe that there actually exists a creature who can hurt my clone and even read my memories. What a shocking, dirty creature! A cold and ruthless voice came from the mouth of the Zombie King clone. Its blood-red eyes also looked at Tangjin intently, their eyes containing a trace of surprise and complete contempt as if it was looking at an ant. After saying this, the Zombie King clone no longer looked at Tangjin. It closed its eyes and stopped moving. However, the tentacles of the 8 statues in the blood pool squirmed silently towards Tangjin at the same time. For a moment, heads rolled in the blood pool, as if countless heads surged towards Tangjin. The expression of every head was incomparably painful and ferocious. Looking at the head slowly surging towards him, Tangjin, who had fallen into the blood pool, panicked. He used his arm to prop himself up from the bottom of the blood pool. But just as his palm touched the ground of the blood pool, he felt that the bottom of the blood pool was a little strange. It seemed to be covered in smooth pebble-like objects. At the same time, the cell phone hanging around his neck vibrated gently again. This scene was so familiar. At this moment, how could Tangjin not guess what was at the bottom of the blood pool? If you dare to hurt me, I'll make you pay the price. Tangjin, who was lying in the blood pool, had a face full of dirty blood. He roared at the cell phone in his heart, absorb it all. Boom! After receiving the order, the cell phone couldn't wait to start absorbing. The speed was astonishing. As the cell phone absorbed crazily, the beads at the bottom of the blood pool were actually instantly emptied. The 8 black statues that had originally stretched their tentacles towards Tangjin actually let out a strange cry in unison. All the tentacles on their bodies flew out of the blood pool, and countless heads fluttered as they pounced fiercely at Tangjin. At the same time, the black altar also emitted an explosion. The Zombie King clone that was killed by an ant. Lowly ant, you're courting death. The angry voice of the Zombie King clone sounded again. This time, its body slowly floated in the air and suddenly stood up. Its blood-colored long hair instantly became extremely long. A portion of its long hair covered its lower body, and the rest of its hair slowly danced and squirmed around its body like a living thing. The Zombie King clone looked at Tangjin fiercely. It was obvious that Tangjin's actions had completely angered it. You keep calling an ant. Shut up. I'm not an ant. Tangjin opened his mouth and cursed. At the same time, he glared back without showing any weakness. There was not a trace of fear in his eyes. Tangjin still had his life-saving ability. Although using it in front of the Spirit Brain Zombie King, who knew spatial teleportation ability might lead to unimaginable consequences, Tang Jin couldn't care less. It was really a life and death moment, he couldn't care too much. However, apart from using his teleportation ability, he seemed to have other choices. For example, in the cell phone, there was an app store filled with advanced technology. Tang Jin was clearly in a life and death crisis, but many thoughts flashed through his mind like lightning. However, his slightly absent-minded expression made the Zombie King clone misunderstand. In fact, the other party took it as silent contempt. The Spirit Brain Zombie King led its subordinates to fight in all directions and kill countless powerful opponents. In the end, it became one of the 8 great zombie kings. When had a low ant ever revealed such an expression in front of it? Even if it had done it before, the final outcome was that the other party's body and soul were destroyed by it. As a dignified zombie king, it couldn't tolerate any disrespect. At this moment, ferocious flames shot out of the eyes of the Zombie King clone. Strands of hair fluttered automatically without wind, and it pounced over with the tentacles of the black statues, wanting to immediately suck Tang Jin dry and kill him. However, Tang Jin didn't give it this chance at all. Just before these attacks descended, he raised his middle finger at the Zombie King clone and his body flashed strangely. In front of the Spirit Brain Zombie King, Tang Jin himself actually disappeared strangely. When Tang Jin appeared again, his body was actually 100 meters away. As he turned around, he cursed at the Spirit Brain Zombie King. "Go to hell, you shameless exhibitionist." After Tang Jin cursed, something with clear smoke was thrown over from afar. Then, it fell into the blood pool with a splash. When the Zombie King clone floating in the blood pool saw the scene, its eyes were filled with surprise. This lowly little ant in front of it actually mastered the teleportation skill that it could barely use. Even if the Zombie King's main body used this secret skill, a trace of energy wave would appear before it was activated. However, before this little ant teleported, there was no abnormality at all. Moreover, the other party was so weak. The Spirit Brain Zombie King immediately became interested in Tang Jin. It wanted to capture him and dissect him for research before turning him into a zombie slave and locking him in the laboratory. Explore new levels on nvelby.com. Relying on the strength of its clone, the Spirit Brain Zombie King completely ignored the little thing thrown by Tang Jin and stared fixedly at Tang Jin. However, because of its contempt, Tang Jin's bomb easily fell into the blood pool. Boom! After a loud bang, the blood pool was blown into pieces. A pool of dirty blood was scattered everywhere by the shock wave of the explosion. Even the black altar was severely damaged. Among the 8 black statues, 3 had been completely destroyed. The other 5 were also covered in cracks, and purple-black liquid was constantly seeping out. "Ah, I'm going to kill you." As soon as the blood pool was blown up, the Zombie King clone immediately felt weak, and this feeling was getting stronger and stronger. In the distant unknown world, the gloomy-faced Spirit Brain Zombie King was about to go crazy. It had already forgotten how many years it had been since it was this angry. The current Zombie King clone had yet to mature. It could only carry an extremely weak trace of its soul, and any attack it suffered would still leave irreparable damage. However, it had no choice but to come because it felt that a strange power was constantly destroying its clone. If he didn't take action to solve it, it probably wouldn't be long before the organs and meridians of this clone turned into a pile of meat. Previously, when the Zombie Lord lost its blood essence, its plan had already been obstructed. If it weren't for the fact that it still needed to rely on the Zombie Lord to carry out its plan, the Spirit Brain Zombie King might have immediately killed its stupid subordinate. The blood essence of the zombie race was extremely precious. It often required countless years to condense a single drop. Aside from being cultivated with the blood essence of the Zombie Lord, the Zombie King clone was now also injured. If it didn't stop the other party, it would probably have to wait for countless years before the cultivation of the next clone could be completed. Therefore, the Spirit Brain Zombie King's soul had no choice but to descend forcefully, preparing to kill this ant that dared to destroy its clone. But looking at the terrible scene now, this guy he regarded as an ant had not only damaged his clone, but also destroyed the black altar used to nurture his clone. The Spirit Brain Zombie King went crazy. If it had known earlier, it would have killed this guy without hesitation. However, it seemed to be too late. The Spirit Brain Zombie King had already sensed that this clone's repulsive force was getting stronger and stronger, and the mysterious power of this world was also driving his soul out of this world. Looking at Tangjin, who was about to rush out of the building, with an indignant expression, the Spirit Brain Zombie King raised its arm and pointed at his back from afar. Then, a blood-colored light dot flew into his body. After being infected by the aura of this zombie king's oath of death, you will be hunted down by all the zombie race. Damn ant, I definitely won't let you off. Sooner or later, I'll turn you into my zombie slave. The Spirit Brain Zombie King roared indignantly. Then, its zombie king clone's eyes bulged out. A few strange sounds came from its throat, and it actually fell to the ground with 7 apertures bleeding. Before long, the zombie king clone slowly squirmed and collapsed, finally turning into a pile of meat. Tangjin didn't know that the Spirit Brain Zombie King, one of the 8 zombie kings of the zombie race, had actually been crippled by him. He also didn't know that at the last moment before the Spirit Brain Zombie King's soul left, it threw a zombie king oath that was tainted with the aura of a zombie king on him. This was the hunting signal agreed by the 8 zombie kings of the zombie race. Once it was released, the zombie race would all pursue the target ruthlessly. Perhaps the indignant Spirit Brain Zombie King would still come up with other methods to continue its plan to conquer the building world, but those things were temporarily unrelated to Tangjin, who was busy fleeing. Tangjin, who had just escaped from the wild building, was almost surrounded by all the zombie monsters outside the building. Tangjin was extremely depressed. How did these zombie monsters discover him? He had clearly activated the quantum invisibility screen. The last time he sneaked into the wild building, these zombie monsters had yet to discover him. But now, he seemed to have become the sworn enemy of all the zombie monsters. They all widened their red eyes and pounced at him desperately. They seemed to want to swallow him alive. Although these zombie monsters couldn't see him, they could lock onto his position. Saber Shield Ghost soldiers raised their weapons and tried to smash his face while zombie archers raised their tattered battle bow and shot randomly. Tangjin's current appearance was as miserable as it could be. Tangjin took out the purple short sword he named Purple Lightning and counterattacked as he dodged. If not for the defense of his black cloak, he would have been covered in injuries. Escape from the zombie army. The sharpness of Purple Lightning was indeed extraordinary. The zombie monster's flexible and strong body was actually unable to block Purple Lightning's cutting. The sword easily pierced into the zombie monster's body. With a sharp weapon in hand, Tangjin, who was at level 2, had already killed 4 Saber Shield Ghost soldiers. Compared to the last time when he relied on schemes to deal with those Saber Shield Ghost soldiers, Tangjin was really fighting in close combat this time. The shocking battle between life and death made Tangjin's blood boil. There were no less than hundreds of zombie monsters densely surrounding him. The 4 Saber Shield Ghost soldiers that Tangjin killed were nothing at all. Often, just as he killed a zombie monster, the next one would rush up impatiently. Damn! What sin have I committed? Tangjin's mouth tasted like blood. In just a few minutes of being surrounded, he had already suffered countless heavy blows. Almost every attack could crush a strong adult man to death. After all, these monsters had powerful strength that far exceeded ordinary humans. It was all thanks to the protection of the black cloak that he didn't become meat paste, but this didn't mean that Tangjin was fine. It was because the Black Cloak had an extremely good defense against cutting and piercing damage, but it seemed to be a little powerless against heavy attacks. The strength could still be felt faintly through the Black Cloak. Although it was much weaker, Tang Jin was still shocked until he almost vomited blood. I have to think of a way to escape as soon as possible. Otherwise, once I'm exhausted, I can only choose to teleport. But teleporting among the zombie monsters is clearly not a good idea. Tang Jin quickly dodged the zombies' attacks while thinking of a way to escape. The reason why Tang Jin could teleport in front of the Zombie King clone and return nearly 100 meters away from the Zombie King clone was because he had downloaded and activated a plugin worth 500,000 gold coins just as he was about to be attacked. Beginner Level Map Instant Transmission Plugin allows user to teleport anywhere in the map. It can be used once every hour. The download price is 500,000 gold coins. The more than 500,000 gold coins he had just obtained in the blood pool were instantly consumed. After destroying the zombie monster's blood pool and obtaining another life-saving skill, Tang Jin felt that it was worth it. Unfortunately, the map teleportation had just been used up, and the cooldown time had yet to arrive, so there was no hope at all. Tang Jin could only find another way. Your favorite ovals at n/vl/bin.com. He had stuffed many life-saving items into the storage space previously to prevent any accidents. He took out bombs from the space one after another and ignited them as he dodged. Then, he threw them randomly at the places with more densely packed zombie monsters. At the same time that he threw the bomb, he also activated the infrasonic wave attack and started an indiscriminate attack. Explosions sounded one after another among the zombie monsters. Countless zombie monsters were blown into the sky and then fell heavily. Almost everywhere Tang Jin walked in, there was an empty space cleared by the bomb. The grass was filled with the limbs and minced meat of the zombie monsters. Some level 2 zombie monsters were also killed by bombs. However, no matter how many level 2 monsters he killed now, it couldn't help him level up. Only by killing level 3 monsters would it be helpful for his level advancement. Some level 3 zombie monsters were also affected by the shock wave of the explosion, but none of them died. Their powerful bodies greatly weakened the lethality of the bomb. On the other hand, the infrasound attack used by Tang Jin had already revealed a trace of effect. The zombie monsters that had been attacking Tang Jin crazily previously had already become slow. They swayed left and right as they walked before they began to vomit and pee, causing extremely smelly black liquid to appear everywhere. Some of the zombie monsters had even fallen to the ground. It was impossible to tell if they were dead or alive. Tang Jin also noticed the scene. Seeing a gap in the encirclement of the zombie monsters, how could he miss this opportunity? He immediately waved purple lightning crazily and forcefully opened a bloody path. Just as Tang Jin thought that he was about to escape, a monster-like warhorse blocked his path. This warhorse was tall and strong, its entire body filled with muscles. At the same time, it was covered in heavy horse armor. Its blood-red beast eyes revealed the bloodthirsty killing intent that only cruel beasts had. A knight in heavy armor was sitting on a horse. In his hand was an extremely wide 3-meter-long iron spear that was suffused with a blood-colored cold light. Zombie Warhorse, Level 3 Monster. It has a violent nature and astonishing endurance. It relies on biting and trampling attacks. Its weakness is that it's afraid of strong light explosions. Zombie Heavy Cavalry, Level 4 Monster. Wearing heavy armor, its defense is extremely strong and its strength is incomparably great. It can use simple battle skills, and its flaw is insufficient flexibility. After leaving its mount, its battle power is greatly reduced, and it can barely move. Just as this information flashed in front of Tang Jin's eyes, the cavalry had already shot at him with a heavy and shocking aura. If he was hit by its spear, his head would probably immediately be separated from his body. In the face of the attack of a level 4 monster, how could Tang Jin dare to let his guard down at all? At this moment, it was too late to dodge, but he took out a heavy shield from his storage space at lightning speed and faced the cavalry's steel spear. The shield Tang Jin took out was a little unique. It was more like a huge metal defense wall than a shield. It was 2 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide. There was an observation hole in the middle. Tang Jin had specially bought high-quality steel to weld it. This defensive shield weighed 230 pounds. The bottom was even welded with a support frame. It was stable and firm, completely able to withstand the violent impact of small vehicles like motorcycles. A huge shield stood in front of Tang Jin, actually completely covering his body. If not for the powerful help of the storage space, Tang Jin wouldn't have been able to use such an overweight defensive weapon at all. In an instant, the heavy armored cavalry's attack arrived. Clang! With a loud bang, the heavy metal shield trembled, and a dent was left on the surface. The power of this zombie heavy cavalry was actually so powerful. Tang Jin felt as if his arm was about to break. The vibration almost made him vomit blood, but he also dodged the fatal blow of the other party's spear. He retracted the shield at an incomparably fast speed. At the same time, Tang Jin activated the magnesium explosion. An extremely dazzling light flashed, and the cavalry horse immediately neighed. It struggled uneasily and raised its 2 front hooves high. Seeing that he couldn't miss this opportunity, Tang Jin charged forward and arrived below the horse's abdomen. The purple lightning in his hand slashed at the horse's back leg twice. The zombie war horse neighed again. The incomparably sharp purple lightning short sword easily cut off the war horse's hind legs, causing it to fall to the ground unsteadily. Roar! The zombie monster heavy rider that landed on the ground roared and stabbed at Tang Jin. However, Tang Jin was already prepared. He released his shield to block again, but it was pierced through by the zombie heavy cavalry. At the same time that he was shocked by the powerful strength of the zombie monster heavy cavalry, Tang Jin ran for his life into the weeds without hesitation. After breaking through the obstruction of a few scattered corpse monsters at the edge of the area, Tang Jin madly ran all the way without stopping. Only when he was 3 kilometers away from the wild building did he stop while panting. Tang Jin coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. He wiped the corner of his mouth, but his mind was filled with questions. Previously, when he checked the memories of the Spirit Brain Corpse King, he found that as long as it was a visitor from another world who entered this world, a brain bead would be produced in the head, and sooner or later, they would lose their mind and become a monster that wandered around this world. Then, would his own brain also grow brain beads? Would he also become a monster? This question caused Tang Jin's heart to turn cold. He was faintly worried. Even a powerful existence like the spiritual Brain Corpse King couldn't avoid this result. He was just an ordinary nobody before he transmigrated. Could he really escape from this heavenly law? Even though Tang Jin had yet to sense anything strange with his body up until now, who knew how this process was carried out? It seemed that he would have to find time to do a physical examination. He hoped that he would be safe and sound. After he stopped thinking about this, Tang Jin thought about the Spirit Brain Corpse King's plan. The spiritual Brain Corpse King was powerful and must have countless resources. If it insisted on coming to this world, no one would be able to stop it. First, he had stolen the Corpse Monster Lord's chest, and now he had destroyed the blood pool used to cultivate the Corpse King's clone. The hatred between him and the Spirit Brain Corpse King could be said to be endless. Tang Jin knew that this matter wouldn't end so easily just from the words that the Spirit Brain Corpse King had said before he rushed out of the building. The two sides would meet sooner or later. If that really happened, how would he deal with it? Tang Jin thought as he walked. There were a myriad of thoughts in his heart. What he didn't know was that he had already killed the Corpse King's clone by mistake, and the Spirit Brain Corpse King had even issued the Corpse King oath to kill. But even if he knew, it didn't matter. Anyway, it was already like this, how bad could it be? Even if the Spirit Brain Corp's king didn't look for trouble with Tangjin, he still had the intention to kill it and its subordinates. Tangjin slowly walked along a small path in the wilderness. He was thinking about how to deal with the invasion plan of these corpse monsters. However, he did not expect an intense shout to be transmitted from the front. He carefully went forward to take a look, only to see a team of 30 to 40 people besieging the 3 corpse monster centurions. Although there were quite a few people on the other side, it could be seen from their attire that they were 2 distinct teams. One of the groups of wild cultivators in tattered armor was clearly the most common wanderer exploration team in the wilderness. They were split into 3 groups and attacked the corpse monster centurion from the outer perimeter. The group that was fighting the corpse monster centurion head-on was a group of youths wearing the same equipment. Their combat techniques were skillful, and their cooperation was also very tacit. They had always occupied the upper hand in the battle with the corpse monster centurion. Through the equipment of these people, Tangjin recognized that they were cultivators from Black Rock City. Tangjin's eyes focused. Had Black Rock City finally made a move? After all, these zombie monsters were different from ordinary wandering monsters. They were considered invaders from other planes. Once they grew stronger, the status of Black Rock City would be in jeopardy. If he was not careful, Black Rock City would become history. Therefore, killing these invaders before they had a chance to develop was the best choice for Black Rock City. The corpse monster centurion was dressed in black heavy armor and brandished a huge weapon that was 2 to 3 meters long. In addition to his strong body, his combat power was very strong. There were already many human corpses lying around the battlefield, and the corpse monster centurion was still killing like a tiger. Even though their bodies were covered in wounds and the arrows on their bodies were like porcupines, they showed no signs of weakening. Fighting with such a perverted monster was a form of torture in itself. Tangjin felt bored after watching for a while. He activated the quantum stealth light screen and prepared to quietly go around the edge of the battlefield. However, just as he was halfway around the battlefield, a corpse monster centurion that was closest to him suddenly stopped fighting and turned to look in his direction. Tangjin, who had turned on the quantum invisibility light screen, also saw the scene. He looked at the corpse monster centurion in a daze and thought, "Is this guy targeting me?" This thought had just surfaced in Tangjin's mind when he saw that the corpse monster centurion had actually given up on fighting. It let out a furious roar and pounced straight at his position. F***ck your grandma. Tangjin's tone was a little flustered and exasperated. You don't care about the many enemies in front of you, but you just had to come for your father. Did I dig up your ancestral grave? I turned on my invisibility, but I could still find him. The even worse scene was yet to come. As the first corpse monster centurion left the battle and rushed towards Tangjin, the remaining 2 corpse monster centurions seemed to have also discovered Tangjin and actually pounced over at the same time. Tangjin did not hesitate to turn his head and run. At the same time, he was wailing in his heart. Could it be that my taunting ability has already broken through the horizon? I'm actually shouting for a beating in a strange manner. After rushing out of the wild building, Tangjin discovered that these corpse monsters that originally couldn't see him actually seemed to have an anti-stealth ability. Not only could they accurately lock onto his position, but they also had a stance of not giving up until one of them died. No matter how stupid Tangjin was, he could guess that he had been tricked by the Spirit Brain Corp's king. You can't kill me yourself, but you got a bunch of little pawns to disgust me. But you can't even beat these little pawns, so you can only run as far as you can. Just you wait, this isn't over. Tangjin cursed and swore in his heart as he ran in the direction of Black Rock City. The group of wanderers and Black Rock City cultivators who had previously besieged the 3-headed monster centurion were confused by the scene in front of them. What's wrong with these monsters? They actually turned around and ran away after fighting for a while. This had never happened before. And NBSP, it must be known that these monsters were all one-track minded. Once they started fighting, it would be either one of them dying. Even if they wanted to escape, it should be the humans. As monsters, you actually fled at the last minute. How can you face the elders of Jiangdong in the future? However, from the looks of these monsters' rage, they didn't seem to be running away. Instead, they seemed to be chasing after their mortal enemies. Moreover, they were moving in a strange direction. Holy shit, it's Black Rock City. Immediately, the cultivators of Black Rock City felt their hair stand on end. Each and every one of them started to run as fast as the wind and began to chase after the 3 corpse monster centurions with all their might. The eyes of the cultivators from Black Rock City who were following closely behind turned red. They could not allow these monsters to get close to Black Rock City. That was their home. Whether it was the wanderers or the residents of the city, the meaning of their home was extremely sacred, and it was worth them risking their lives to protect it. When the wanderers saw the Black Rock City cultivators chasing after the corpse monster centurion with all their might, they did not want to be outdone. They fought to be the first to catch up. He had to take advantage of this rare opportunity to get along well with the cultivators of Black Rock City. If one of the cultivators found him pleasing to the eye and rewarded him with a precious recommendation from the residents of the Tower City, he would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of his life. There was more than one wanderer with this thought in mind, so they ran as fast as they could. Their speed was not inferior to the cultivators of the same level in Black Rock City, who were much more powerful than them. As a result, many wanderers saw such a scene along the way. The 3 corpse monster centurions ran forward like crazy, their huge feet stomping on the ground, producing a muffled sound that was like the beating of drums. They ran while waving their weapons, as if they were mortal enemies. Behind the monster was a group of cultivators from Black Rock City and a group of wanderers and wild cultivators who were out of breath. However, no one could see that in front of these monsters and wanderers, there was a visitor from another world who had run so far that he was about to vomit blood. When he first started to escape, Tangjin actually wanted to activate the teleportation to escape. Because he had only run for a short time, his legs were already numb and sore. At the same time, his chest felt tight and his breathing became rapid. However, when he inadvertently turned his head to observe, he found that in addition to the corpse monster centurion who was in hot pursuit, there were also dozens of people following closely behind. In the process of the pursuit, not a single person was left behind. At the same time that he admired the perseverance of these people, Tangjin also suddenly realized that he might have relied too much on those applications and had neglected the increase of his own strength. It was just 3 corpse monster centurions, and they had already put him in such a difficult situation. If the Spirit Brain Corpse King were to personally chase after him, what would he have to resist? Tangjin felt a little guilty when he thought of this. In terms of cultivation, he definitely couldn't compare to the Spiritual Brain Corpse King. After all, the other party was a dignified corpse king, and any of his subordinates would probably have the cultivation of a lord tier. If he was not a match for them, he could still activate the teleportation to escape. However, there was a certain risk in activating the teleportation. If the Spiritual Brain Corpse King had the ability to crack or limit the teleportation, then he would really be dumbfounded. Didn't he see that when the Corpse King's soul descended, the infrasonic wave was forcefully shut off? From this, it could be seen that the other party had power and means that he couldn't resist. What's more, the other party had only descended with a wisp of his soul. If this soul had been a little stronger, the situation would have become extremely terrible, and it would be uncertain if he could escape unscathed. In a situation where he could not count on any of these, the only thing that could help him was his own strength. Strength came from tough training and cultivation. This was an eternal truth. Tang Jin believed that he should be able to defeat the rogue cultivators among the cultivators of the same level. This was because his physique was better than ordinary wanderers. However, he wasn't confident when he fought Lu Qing. After all, he had seen the battle scenes of cultivator Lu Qing several times before. After comparison, he found that cultivator Lu Qing's combat power was not just a little higher than his. They were all at the same level, so why was the other party's strength so high? Wasn't it all due to bitter cultivation? Read the latest stories novilbin.com. Even if the cultivation conditions of the cultivators in Lu Qing were much higher than that of the wanderers and wild cultivators, Tang Jin was not any worse than them. In fact, he had far surpassed them. Since that was the case, why should he be worse than them? It seemed that he had been relying too much on external objects all this time and had neglected the improvement of his own strength. Tang Jin's eyes hardened when he thought of this. Since this was the case, he would start working hard today and see if he could break through his limits. He wouldn't put himself in danger. He would only try his best to stimulate his maximum power. Once things got out of hand, he would also activate the teleportation to leave. Hence, Tang Jin gritted his teeth and persevered. Even though he was exhausted during the running process, he still felt that he had not reached his limit. Hence, he gritted his teeth and persevered. Tang Jin did not know how long he had been running for as he persevered like this time and time again. When he felt that his consciousness was a little dazed, he felt a wave of strength being stimulated from the depths of his body. Even if this strength was as thin as a thread, it still caused Tang Jin to feel joy in his heart. He knew that this was the extreme potential strength that he was pursuing. This power was the root cause of the disparity in strength between cultivators of the same level. Lu Qing could stimulate this power through inheritance and support. As for wild cultivators, due to the lack of inheritances and resources, only a very small number of people could activate this power. Due to the awakening and stimulation of this extreme strength, Tang Jin felt that his entire body was filled with strength. Just as he was about to continue to run madly, he suddenly discovered that an incomparably huge building had appeared in front of him. Looking carefully, it was the overlord of the nearby wilderness, the Black Rock Castle. At that moment, a group of cultivators had already rushed out of Black Rock City's gate. They were riding on war horses and were charging towards him. It was likely that the cultivators guarding the city had discovered the corpse monster Centurion behind him. As they were responsible for the safety of Black Rock City, these cultivators naturally would not allow the corpse monster Centurion to come close to this place. Otherwise, it would be a dereliction of their duty. At the same time when these cultivators appeared, Tang Jin also discovered that there was a strange movement inside the tower. On a window 50 meters above the ground in the Black Rock Tower, Tang Jin saw a few human figures flashing. They seemed to be operating some sort of machine. A moment later, a few black dots shot out from the window, and their target was the corpse monster Centurion that was chasing after him. Pfft! After a few muffled sounds like leather being hit, the three corpse monster Centurions hurled towards the sky, but they were pierced through by a few black giant arrows. The huge black arrow was stuck in the corpse monster Centurion's body, which was a few meters tall. The scene was extremely eye-piercing. The destructive power of these black arrows was extremely strong. Even if the corpse monster Centurion's body was extremely strong, he could not withstand such a powerful weapon. Taking advantage of the delay caused by the corpse monster Centurion's injuries, the pursuers and reinforcements swarmed forward at the same time, surrounding the corpse monster Centurion in a frenzied attack. Many ants could kill an elephant, and a fierce tiger feared a pack of wolves. In just a few minutes, the heavily injured three corpse monster Centurions were cut down and fell to the ground. After struggling for a while, they were completely killed. Tang Jin, who was invisibly sitting by the side, watched all of this. His heart became even more eager to possess his own strength. He didn't need to run his own errands. When fighting, he would listen to his orders, and his subordinates would rush up. Just thinking about it felt satisfying. No, he had to go back and tell Qianlong that there was danger everywhere. He had to recruit as many soldiers as possible. If he could get a group of powerful subordinates, then even if the spiritual Brain Corpse King came, he would have a helper. Would his chances of winning increase a little? The more Tang Jin thought about it, the more excited he became. He impatiently wanted to run back to Wanderer Town to discuss this with the 1,000 dragons, but he didn't expect that his legs were already extremely numb. He fell to the ground the moment he got up. Tang Jin could only reply with a bitter smile. Although he had successfully stimulated his strength to its limit this time around, the damage to his body was not small. It was likely that he would need to properly recuperate. Since he was temporarily unable to move, Tang Jin took out a pair of binoculars from his storage space and began to carefully observe the situation in Black Rock City. From the outside, Black Rock City looked similar to the ordinary residential buildings in his original world. However, it was more ancient and heavy, as indestructible as a black rock. Perhaps this was the origin of the name Black Rock City. Unlike the residential buildings, most of the windows outside the building had been sealed off or transformed into a shooting platform. At the top of the tower, there were several strangely shaped giant ballistae. The ordinary citizens of Black Rock City lived in the large inner courtyard of the tower. For many of the residents of the city was the world they lived in. Some of them had never stepped out of the gate of the city in their entire lives. This was the world of Luqing. The inside and outside of the city were two completely different worlds. The movement caused by the corpse monster Centurion earlier was not small. At this moment, there were many human figures flashing by the windows of Black Rock City, as if they were observing the movement below. The cultivators from Black Rock City loaded the corpses of the 3 corpse monster Centurions onto the horse carriages and prepared to pull them into Black Rock City. The wanderers and wild cultivators who had been chasing after them along the way were chased away. This was because wanderers were strictly prohibited from approaching within a 1-kilometer radius of Black Rock City. Otherwise, they would be killed without mercy. This time, they were being lenient on them for helping to kill the corpse monster Centurion. Otherwise, the cultivators guarding Black Rock City would have attacked them long ago. The wanderers and wild cultivators left resentfully. Tang Jin endured the pain in his legs and quietly followed behind these cultivators. He walked step by step through the main gate of Black Rock City. Under the protection of the quantum stealth light curtain, no cultivator in Black Rock City discovered Tang Jin, who was not a resident of Lu City. The huge metal gate of Black Rock City was driven by a lever and a gear. Usually, it would only open a small door that could only accommodate 2 people. This time, because they were using a carriage, the huge metal door was only raised by a third. After Tang Jin passed through the large metal door, a wave of caw-caw sounds of huge gears grinding together could be heard. The metal door slowly descended, isolating the wilderness outside. In the inner space of the tower, Tang Jin was standing in a spacious passage that was several meters high. On both sides of the passage, there was a huge metal brazier every 10 meters. A white oil was piled up in it. After it was lit, it was not only extremely bright but also emitted a faint fragrance. On the walls of the tunnel were murals. The contents of the murals seemed to be the founding process of Black Rock City and its former glory. According to the contents of the murals, the first founder of Black Rock City came from a very distant place. He was a noble child in a giant city. He had yearned for an adventurer's life in the wilderness since he was young, and he also hoped to become the city lord of a tower city and make his family more prosperous. So, on the second day after the coming-of-age ceremony, he led his guards and began to travel in the wilderness. During this period, they had encountered countless dangers and entered countless magical areas. With courage and luck, this noble child finally gathered all the materials needed to build a city and built Black Rock City far away from home. Then, there were also scenes of monsters attacking the city, leveling up the city, and fighting with other cities. There were dozens of them. After Tang Jin finished looking at these murals, he pondered for a moment before he began to move towards the inner part of Black Rock City. After walking through a passage that was nearly 100 meters long, a large door appeared in front of Tang Jin. At the same time, the bustling voices of people were transmitted over. It was a huge open-air square. Many residents of the city were strolling leisurely in the square. They were dressed neatly and cleanly, and there was no trace of the panic and confusion of wanderers on their faces. Instead, they looked relaxed and calm. Tang Jin walked into a hidden corner. After turning off the quantum stealth light beam, he imitated the form of the Lu city's residents and easily mixed into the crowd in the square. The square covered a large area. It was located in the center of Black Rock City and was about 30,000 square meters in size. It was surrounded by tall buildings. Most of the time, the square was covered in shadows, but the sun was right above the square. The sun was warm and comfortable, so it was no wonder that so many residents of the building came out for a walk. In the middle of the square stood a huge emerald green statue. From its appearance, it should be the founder of Black Rock City, the noble son from a distant city. Tang Jin looked at the statue from afar and discovered that the surface of the statue seemed to have a faint flowing light flashing. It seemed to be carved from some kind of crystal-clear jade. Tang Jin had been in the tower world for so long, but this was the first time he had seen something similar to jade. He couldn't help but feel a trace of curiosity. Tang Jin, who had a carefree expression, slowly walked to the front of the statue and carefully observed it. The material used for this statue was completely dark green and looked tender and attractive. It was very similar to the jade that Tang Jin had seen in a jewelry store. Moreover, it was the top grade. Tang Jin didn't know much about pearls and jades. He wasn't sure if this was jadeite or not. After all, there were many types of jadeite that had similar colors. He couldn't even tell jadeite and nephrite apart. However, none of these could stop Tang Jin's plan to take action. That's right. Tang Jin had taken a fancy to this beautiful jade and was prepared to secretly take a piece off and bring it back to be appraised. After looking around and seeing that no one was paying attention to him, Tang Jin took out the purple electric short sword from the storage space with lightning speed and applied force on the damaged base of the statue. With strength that far exceeded that of an ordinary person, coupled with the incomparably sharp purple lightning short sword, a bull-sized jade stone was directly cut off. It was then quickly kept by Tang Jin into his storage space. LL new rise at N0V/LBI/.cm. After he was done with this, Tang Jin left the statue in the middle of the square as if nothing had happened and began to stroll around. Tang Jin discovered that there were shops next to each other on the edge of the square. These shops operated many items. There were clothes, food, medicinal herbs, and grocery stores. Tang Jin chose a weapons store and slowly walked in. The weapon shop was about a few hundred square meters in size and was divided into 3 floors. The first floor was the hall where one could browse and choose at will, while the second floor required a waste token of a cultivator from Black Rock City to enter. As for the shops on the 3rd floor, only the shop's distinguished guests could enter. Compared to the weapons in the Wanderer Town's weapon store, the weapons in the Black Rock City's weapon store were clearly of a higher grade. Just from their appearance, they looked much better. The skilled craftsmen of Black Rock City had not only improved the quality of these cold weapons, but they had also spent a lot of effort on the decoration. For example, the longsword in front of Tang Jin used techniques such as hollow and embedding. Gemstones and the bones and teeth of some monsters were decorated on the scabbard, making the shape of the longsword extremely beautiful. The sword's body was folded, forged, and washed with acid, so that the patterns on the sword's body were revealed and looked beautiful. Tang Jin knew that there was a type of Damascus knife in the original world, and the pattern on its surface was very similar to it. Such an exquisitely crafted sword was naturally expensive. It actually cost 30 level 3 brain beads, which was equivalent to 3,000 level 1 brain beads. If the ordinary weapons on the first floor were already so expensive, then the weapons on the second and third floor would probably be even more expensive. Tang Jin glanced at the entrance to the second floor. He really wanted to activate the quantum stealth light screen to check it out. However, the two cultivators guarding the second floor made him dispel this thought. This was because Tang Jin could sense rank for energy fluctuations from the two of them. He was currently in Black Rock City and could be considered to be in a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. Tang Jin did not want to attract unnecessary trouble. Tang Jin stood up and left the weapon shop after sweeping his gaze around once. After which, he walked into a medicinal ingredient shop at the side. Tang Jin had just entered the medicinal herb store when he smelled an extremely special smell. He had smelled this smell a few years ago in a temple with a lot of incense. It was said that this fragrance originated from a precious spice, which was rare in production. Sometimes, a piece of top-quality spice could even be exchanged for a villa. Taking a deep breath, Tang Jin carefully savored the taste. The fragrance of the spice was indeed not bad. Following the smell, Tang Jin turned his head and saw a small and exquisite bone incense burner placed on an ancient stone table. The smell was being emitted from this incense burner. Seeing Tang Jin's gaze land on the incense burner, a delicate and pretty young lady wearing a light green leather jacket walked over. She smiled and said to Tang Jin, "This is a spice that our shop just imported from the city of Xiangdu. It's sweet and pure, and can refresh one's mind. If you use it for a long time, it will be very helpful for your cultivation." Compared to the wanderers outside, the girl's face didn't show any signs of suffering, and her clothes were clean and proper. Tang Jin glanced at the young lady before gently nodding his head. He opened his mouth and inquired about the price. Perhaps it was because of the high production rate in the other world, the price of this spice was not very expensive. Tang Jin did not hesitate and took out the brain pearl to buy a pack. After keeping the spice, Tang Jin looked at the other products in the medicinal herb store. After looking around, Tang Jin realized that there were many types of medicinal herbs here, but he didn't recognize any of them. This made his original plan of buying a few hundred-year-old ginseng and selling it for a high price fall through. At the same time, Tang Jin also discovered that many of the medicinal herbs in the medicinal herb store were collected from the monsters. Bone marrow, gallbladder, blood powder, the raw materials of these herbs were all from the monsters in the wilderness. There were even some bottles with monster organs soaked in them. The girl introduced it as a tonic wine with nourishing effects. On the counter that was embedded with a glass-like transparent object, there were all kinds of finished medicines. After Tang Jin inquired about the effects, he casually bought a few bottles and prepared to take them back to do experiments. After walking out of the medicinal herb store, Tang Jin was thinking of finding an opportunity to sneak into the inner part of the building. However, he accidentally discovered that there were dozens of people driving a group of carriages as they headed towards the entrance of an underground parking lot. Tang Jin's heart stirred. After he found a hidden position and activated the quantum stealth light curtain, he walked over unhurriedly. This underground entrance was very spacious. There were a few Black Rock City cultivators standing guard at the entrance. Tang Jin tried his best to be as gentle as possible as he walked over silently. After Tang Jin went in, one of the Black Rock City cultivators who was in charge of guarding the entrance looked at the underground tunnel with a puzzled expression. He seemed to have heard a slight strange sound coming from the tunnel. After confirming that there was nothing unusual in the passage, the cultivator turned his head and no longer paid any attention. Tang Jin followed the underground tunnel and walked for nearly 100 meters before he discovered that he was in a huge underground space. From the size of it, it seemed to be similar to the square on the ground. Perhaps this underground space was built under the square. He carefully observed the surrounding walls of this underground space and found that they were extremely solid, as expected of a city built by the power of heaven and earth. The underground space was man-made and divided into countless small areas. They were piled up with stones and filled with soil. The surface of the soil was doused with a layer of sticky liquid that emitted a faint odor. Tang Jin took a look and discovered that every small area was the same. Tang Jin was quite curious when he saw this. He secretly guessed what was beneath the soil. He took out a shovel from the space, walked to a dark corner, and used the shovel to dig. After digging for only 2 days, he felt the shovel hit something. Forcefully pushing the shovel upwards, Tang Jin saw a white spherical object the size of a human head being dug out. Tang Jin carefully moved forward to observe it, only to discover that this thing was actually an extra-large potato. Even Tang Jin couldn't tell whether this thing was a potato or not. However, looking at its appearance, it did look like a potato. Even Tang Jin couldn't tell whether this thing was a potato or not. However, looking at its appearance, it did look like a potato. However, Tang Jin had never heard of such a large potato. LL news to rise at N0V/LBI/.cm. Tang Jin dug a few more times and discovered that the ground was actually densely covered with these things. Tang Jin guessed that this thing was the main food for the Lu city's residents. Looking at the size of the basement and the size of the potatoes, God knows how many tons of potatoes would be produced in one harvest. If these potatoes could be harvested continuously, the residents of Lu City would not have to worry about food sources. Tang Jin used to wonder what the residents of Lucheng ate every day if they didn't cultivate the land and sow grain. Now, he finally knew that he had to eat these giant potatoes. He dug out 2 potatoes and put them in his storage space. He wanted to take them back and try to plant them. If he succeeded, he could definitely fill the stomachs of many people. However, Tang Jin guessed that the success rate of this matter was very small. If these potatoes were so easy to cultivate, how could there be so many starving wanderers in the wilderness? At this moment, there was no one in the entire underground space. It was impossible for those people and the carriage to disappear for no reason. Therefore, Tang Jin guessed that there was another space in this place. After carefully searching for a while, Tang Jin indeed discovered that another passageway had appeared in a certain dark corner. Could it be that there's another level of space under this underground square? Tang Jin thought as he walked into the passage. A few minutes later, another underground space with the same area appeared in front of him. Like the square above, there were also huge potatoes here. However, in this space, there were still a few residents who were pouring the sticky fertilizer on the soil, but the carriage was still nowhere to be seen. After Tang Jin observed for a while, he indeed discovered another entrance that extended underground. Tang Jin did not hesitate to step in. He wanted to see how many levels of underground space there were in Black Rock City. After walking out of the passage this time, Tang Jin did not see the spectacular scene of potato planting. Instead, he saw patches of mushrooms. Alright, Tang Jin already didn't know how to describe the scene he saw. However, these things in front of him were over 2 meters tall, over 50 centimeters in diameter, and had a parasol-like cap. They indeed looked exactly like mushrooms. These giant mushrooms were in clusters next to each other, and there were even smaller mushrooms growing below them. Other than a 3-meter-wide road, there were giant mushrooms everywhere. In the middle of these mushrooms, the residents of Lu City were cutting them up and cutting them into small pieces, putting them into big baskets. It seemed that this mushroom was also one of the foods of the residents of Lucheng. It could adjust the monotonous taste of the potatoes, or have a pot of potato mushroom soup. It should taste good. Tang Jin actually felt a little hungry as he thought about it. After shaking his head and throwing this thought out of his mind, Tang Jin similarly dug out a piece of mushroom meat and placed it into his storage space. After passing through the huge mushroom forest, another underground passage appeared. Tang Jin no longer felt surprised. Instead, he once again took a step forward. Compared to the previous few floors, Tang Jin smelled a fishy stench the moment he entered the passageway of this floor. It was very similar to the smell of the fertilizer that was poured on the mushrooms and large potatoes. At the same time, the sound of a conversation and the sound of horse hooves stomping on the ground was transmitted over. It was the group of horse carriages that Tang Jin had been chasing all this while. Tang Jin, who had walked out of the tunnel, focused his attention and observed. Very quickly, he was somewhat surprised to discover that there were also quite a number of pond-like isolation areas built in the underground square of this floor. In these isolated pools, there were giant white flesh worms that were 2 meters long. They were soaked in the liquid used to fertilize the potatoes, and they were eating the food that the residents of Luqing scooped out of the buckets in the carriages. Tang Jin made a rough estimate. The number of meat worms that were being raised in this underground plaza was at least several thousand. Were these chubby white worms the main source of meat for the residents of Luqing? When Tang Jin saw these white flesh worms, he immediately thought of the larvae of a type of fly. Tang Jin couldn't help but feel nauseated when he recalled the scene of the wriggling larvae. However, as far as he knew, the larvae were actually very nutritious. There was a dish called meat tendrils that used the larvae of these flies as the main ingredient. It was said that it left a fragrance in the mouth when eaten. Just as Tang Jin's thoughts were wandering, a few strong men wearing leather armbands jumped into the pool. The few of them worked together and slowly wriggled a big white worm into a big iron basket with a handle. After the bug was carried out, the few of them carried it to a stone platform. Someone then brought over clean water and poured it on the bug to wash it. Then, a fierce-looking man stabbed the meat worm's head with a sharp knife. After that, he went around to the ring at the end of the meat worm and pulled it back with force. A complete set of the worm's internal organs had been pulled out. After the burly man threw it into the basin, someone came forward to take the basin away and clean the internal organs. The worm that had its internal organs extracted twitched slightly before it died. The burly man's knife moved swiftly and quickly cut the meat worm into tofu-sized cubes. Each piece of worm meat was white and tender, and it trembled non-stop as if it were frozen. After dissecting one meat worm, the second one was quickly sent over. The burly man repeated the previous action and only stopped after he had dealt with 10 meat worms. Some people were cleaning the empty breeding ponds. First, the stinky liquid was carried away in buckets. After washing it with water, someone put in fist-sized meat worms. After these little flesh worms were put in, they began to gobble up the food in big mouthfuls. They only stopped eating after their bodies were full. The meat worms were fed with the leftovers and some disgusting things that the residents of Lu City had thrown away. When the flesh worms stopped eating and resting, they would excrete a foul-smelling liquid, which was the best fertilizer for the giant potatoes and mushrooms. Tang Jin could not help but sigh when he saw the scene. Perhaps, such a strange food cycle only existed within the tower. After witnessing the entire process, it was unknown what the residents of the building city were thinking. In any case, Tang Jin would definitely not touch this food. After loading the carnivorous worms' carnivorous meat into the carts, the residents drove the carriages away from the place. Tang Jin had also lost interest in continuing to investigate. He quietly followed behind the carriage and slowly walked toward the ground. When they passed by the mushroom forest and potato field, the coachman also carried many baskets of potato mushrooms and pulled them out together. When the carriage reached the ground, people unloaded these things and began to trade in the shops by the square. If the residents of the tower wanted to obtain this food, they would have to use a type of currency issued by Black Rock City to purchase it. At this moment, they were lining up in a long line. They were making a transaction where they paid the money and delivered the goods at the same time. They were buying the insect meat that Tang Jin found difficult to swallow. In addition to the food from the underground space, there were some edible monster jerky, fish, and bird meat, as well as a grain similar to grass seeds. Among the food, Tang Jin also saw some wild vegetables and fruits. They were washed and tied up to be sold. Tang Jin did not know how many residents there were in Black Rock City. However, there were definitely more than 10,000 people. The food in front of him was simply not enough for a day's worth of needs for these residents. Tang Jin guessed that they had other sources of food. It was just that he had yet to come into contact with them. Tang Jin raised his head and glanced at an even higher place in Black Rock City. His eyes slightly narrowed as he carefully passed through the crowd in the plaza and began to search for the entrance to the upper floor. In fact, the entrance to the upper floor was very easy to find. It was just that Tang Jinglong still hadn't noticed it. The entrance closest to him was in the middle of two shops. There were two Black Rock City cultivators with swords guarding the entrance. However, in Tang Jin's opinion, the two of them were just putting on an act. Tang Jin, who had activated the quantum stealth light screen, gently sneaked in. The interior of Black Rock City was extremely large. It was impossible for Tang Jin to wander around aimlessly. Therefore, he had his eyes on a tall girl with a ponytail who was carrying a vegetable basket. He carefully followed behind her. The girl was about 17 or 18 years old. She wore a set of coarse clothes and her movements were agile and strong. She had a level 1 cultivation. She hummed along the way, and her slender legs quickly climbed up the stairs. In the blink of an eye, she arrived at the 11th floor. After reaching this floor, there was an extremely long circular corridor. On both sides of the corridor, there were doors of houses next to each other. There were dozens of doors on one side of the passage, which meant that there were more than 100 rooms on this floor. From time to time, the residents would greet this young lady, and she would respond to them one by one with a brilliant smile. Up.dfrm no/v/e/lb I n.co/m. Tang Jin dodged a few children who were running around crazily in the corridor. After the young lady opened her door, he quietly entered her house. This was an extremely plain room, about 10 square meters in area. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and there was not much furniture on the floor, only 2 wooden beds. However, there was a set of swords and leather armor hanging on the wall that made Tang Jin take a few more glances. This was because he could feel a battle aura from the repaired leather armor and sword. However, the young lady's next action gave him a feeling of having his eyes opened. The girl came to a stone platform that was 1 meter square by the wall. She reached out and pressed on a bump on the wall. A stream of water flowed out from the tap-like thing, but the water flow was very slow. The girl placed the food she bought into a basin, washed it with water, and then poured the dirty water into the sewer entrance on the stone platform. Next, the girl cut up the food and put it to the side, then took out a pot. She pressed a red bump on the wall, and a square stone slab on the cooking table quickly turned red, and a heat wave slowly spread out. After he placed the pot on top of it, water vapor quickly emerged from the metal pot, and at the same time, the fragrance of food wafted through the air. Then, he saw the girl scrape a white stone on the stone table a few times with her knife and pour the powder that hung down into the pot. The food that was originally thin and slimy immediately became thick and sticky after the white powder was poured into it. The girl hummed a song as she cooked, but she didn't know that in the corner of her house, an invisible person was watching with his mouth agape. F***CK, is this still the Luqing world? The kitchen equipment of the Luqing residence is comparable to the black technology in the application store. Tang Jin could not help but click his tongue in wonder. His face had an expression of having gained new knowledge. Before he entered the city, he had many speculations about the things inside the city. His ideas were also wild and imaginative, but now that he looked at it again, he realized that he had been too naive. After the girl finished preparing the food, she took out a notebook-sized portrait from under the bed and looked at it silently. From Tangjin's angle, he was able to see the contents of the painting. It was a family portrait. A couple and two children, a boy and a girl, were sitting in the square. The statue of the founder of Black Rock City was used as the background, and the whole family was smiling happily. The girl looked at the portrait, but tears suddenly overflowed from her eyes. She then covered her nose, her thin shoulders trembling slightly, and she began to sob silently. The girl was crying very sadly, but she tried her best to suppress her sobs, as if she didn't want others to hear. Tangjin quietly sighed in his heart when he saw the tear-stained appearance of the girl. He guessed that the family of this girl might have already met with misfortune. Otherwise, she would not display such a painful expression of missing someone when she saw the object. Dong dong dong. There was a sudden knock on the door. The girl seemed to be frightened and her body trembled slightly. She hurriedly stretched out her sleeve to wipe away the remaining tears at the corner of her eyes, and then carefully hid the painting under the bed. He stood up and opened the door. A 14 to 15-year-old youth in black clothes appeared outside. "Sister, I'm back." The young man in black had a bright smile on his face. His light yellow long hair and fair skin made him look very handsome. There was an ordinary long sword tied to the youth's back. Perhaps it was because he had used it often, but the hilt was worn out. "You're back, Rue. Dinner's ready. Hurry up and eat." The young girl smiled and stepped aside, allowing the young man to enter. After a simple wash of his hands, the young man removed the long sword from his back and placed it at the foot of the bed. Then, he sat in front of the stone table where he was cooking. The young girl filled a large bowl with mushroom and potato soup and placed it in front of the young man. She then filled a small bowl for herself. The black-clothed youth named Xiao Rui stirred his food with a spoon and looked at the young girl's slightly red eyes. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sister, you're crying. Your eyes are red and swollen. Are you missing your parents again?" The girl didn't seem to want to show her weakness and helplessness in front of her brother. She quickly shook her head and denied, "Nothing happened. I just didn't sleep well last night." The young man seemed to be struggling. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Sister, you don't have to work so hard to earn brain beads. I'll be able to advance to a rank 2 cultivator soon, and then I'll be able to get more subsidies. I can also team up with my classmates to hunt monsters in the wilderness." Before the young man could finish his sentence, his sister's expression changed and she reprimanded him with a hint of anger. "You don't need to worry about the family's expenses. You just need to cultivate. I'm warning you, you're not allowed to take even half a step out of this building before you reach level 3. Otherwise, don't blame me for not acknowledging you as my brother." The girl, who had always had a soft and weak expression, was very excited at this moment. Her pretty little face had also become a little red because of the fluctuation of her emotions. The young man seemed to be afraid that his sister would be angry, but his expression was somewhat unwilling. He muttered to himself, "If it wasn't for that bastard's plot, Mom and Dad wouldn't have died, and we would still be living happily in the upper class of Luqing. Sister, you don't have to work so hard, Yingluo." "Shut up." The young girl's face revealed a trace of fear. She hurriedly stopped the young man's words, and then carefully walked to the door. After listening carefully for a while and making sure that no one was eavesdropping, he walked to the young man with an angry face and said in a low voice, "Yingluo, how many times have I said this? Don't meddle in the affairs of father and mother. Also, you absolutely can't say these words again. Why are you so disobedient? Are you trying to anger your sister to death?" As the young girl spoke, her large eyes were filled with a trace of mist. The young man with a sullen face quickly admitted his mistake, but his expression seemed to be filled with unwillingness. The girl sighed and sat on the bed. She said to the boy, "Xiaorui, I know that you feel wronged, but things are not as simple as you think. Mom and Dad are already gone, so no one will stand up for us. In fact, they know what happened better than anyone else, but what can they do? That man is Lu Chang's elder. We can't beat him now. If we swallow our anger, we might be able to continue living in Black Rock City. You can also continue to cultivate. However, if we shed all pretenses of cordiality, not only will we be driven out of the tower, but that person will also not let us go. Promise her sister that before she reached level 3, she would not take a single step out of Lucheng and would have to swallow her anger. I know that person's grandson is in the same class as you, and he has been leading his lackeys to bully you, but I beg you, please don't be impulsive." The young girl's words were sincere, and when she said these words, her thin body seemed very helpless. Xiaorui clenched his fists tightly as he listened to his sister's words. The humiliation and unwillingness flashed past his eyes, but they all turned into a long sigh. "All right, I'll agree to it." The young girl's tears turned into a smile when she heard this, and a bright and beautiful smile appeared on her face. He slowly walked in front of the young man and served him a spoonful of food. He smiled and said, "I heard that the blood viper's meat has the effect of helping to improve cultivation. After a while, when I get my salary, I'll buy you one to make soup." The young man shook his head, then nodded, and lowered his head to eat his food in silence. What followed was a long period of silence. During this period, even if the girl started a topic, the young man would only respond simply and not make any more movements. The young girl sighed slightly when she saw this. A trace of heartache flashed in her eyes, but she did not say anything else. Tangjin, who was invisible at the side, witnessed the entire process. During this period of time, his expression changed a few times. Finally, he sized up the young man named Xiaorui with interest. From this young man, he could see a deep sense of unwillingness and humiliation. This kind of extreme emotion could not only create a person, but also destroy a person. If he could make good use of this mentality, he might be able to get some benefits for himself. Of course, the premise was that the other party had to be willing to cooperate with him. Otherwise, it would be easy to go for wool and come home shorn. Tangjin analyzed the mentality of this young man. He wanted to become strong and take revenge for his parents. He didn't want his sister to work hard for him. It would be very difficult to achieve these goals, at least for the siblings in front of them. The embarrassment of life and the spying of the enemy put them in a quagmire of struggle. Wanting to stand out and take revenge was only a distant dream. When they faced this goal, they would probably feel a deep sense of powerlessness. At this moment, as long as Tangjin appeared in front of them, regardless of the role he played, as long as he could give them an obvious hope, there would be a possibility of cooperation between them. However, when Tangjin was choosing his partner, he had once hesitated between siblings. In the end, he still chose his younger brother. This young man called Xiaorui was ambitious and angry. He was also very smart. In the face of benefits, this kind of person would neither refuse nor submit obediently. Instead, he would weigh the gains and losses. However, this kind of person would never give up the dazzling benefits, because they knew the value of this opportunity. It was likely to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you go the right way, if you step out, you'll be rich and prosperous. If you hesitate, you'll miss it, and you'll be ordinary and poor. FIDDEU UPTS on NOV/E/LN.com. She wasn't like her sister, who had concerns in her heart and would rather suffer for herself than implicate her family. However, it was precisely this kind of thinking that caused her to directly reject Tangjin's cooperation. Instead, she chose to live in peace and continue to persist in her dream. No matter how long it took or how bitter it was fine as long as there was hope. Therefore, when the young man left with his sword, Tangjin quietly followed. He slowly followed behind the young man, walking down one corridor after another, up one step after another, and the two gradually left the place where the crowd was dense. The direction the young man was heading in was a quiet passage that almost no one had passed through. Even the fluorescent stones on the wall used for illumination had been damaged. Tangjin did not know what part of Black Rock City this was. However, it was very obvious that this place was suitable for some secret matters. Vist and Velben, .cm for new updates. For example, discussing the cooperation between the two of them. Tangjin's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the young man who was still slowly walking forward. He steadily stopped his footsteps. Then, with a half-smile on his face, he saw that the young man in black named Xiao Rui had also slowly stopped in his tracks. "Why aren't you following me?" The young man turned his head around and faced Tangjin's position as his cold and indifferent voice softly sounded. At the same time, his hand was already on the hilt of his sword. Although he only had a level 1 cultivation, the young man's hand was very steady and strong. Tangjin believed that after the sword was pulled out, it would definitely be as fast as lightning and full of strength. From the looks of it, this young man was very talented in the cultivation of the martial path. However, Tangjin was more interested in how this young man had discovered him and when had he discovered him. Tangjin didn't remove the quantum stealth light curtain. Instead, he asked with an interested tone, "Not bad, you can actually detect my existence." "As far as I know, only a horde leader can find me." "You're only a rank 1 cultivator, how did you do it?" The young man's tone was cold as he replied in a disdainful tone, "Why should I tell you?" "Why? This is a problem. Let me think about it." Tangjin's words paused for a moment before continuing, "Because I can help you realize your dream." "What do you think of that answer?" The teenager's eyes moved and he continued to say in a mocking tone, "Hee, my dream. I've said that I want to be the governor of Black Rock City. Can you help me with that?" "That depends on what price you can pay. However, I guess your dream is not as simple as becoming the governor of Black Rock City, right?" The young man shook his head gently and slowly loosened his grip on the sword hilt. He stared at Tangjin's position for a long time before he faintly opened his mouth and said, "When did you enter my house, and what's your purpose?" Tangjin became even more interested when he heard this. It seemed like the young man had already discovered him when he had just returned home. Of course, this was only his guess. If the young man had really discovered him at that time, then the conversation between him and his sister would not have been so simple. Or it could be said that the conversation between the siblings was actually deliberately said for Tangjin to hear. Tangjin didn't believe that this young man had such a terrifying thought process. Therefore, he guessed that he had given himself away when he followed the young man out. This guy was probably trying to trick him. What an interesting little guy. Tangjin looked at the young man in silence, waiting for him to say the answer. Moreover, Tangjin was certain that the young man would definitely say it. This was actually a method, using some secrets to exchange for mutual trust. This way, after knowing each other's secrets, they would no longer be completely hostile to each other, and there would be a basis for cooperation. As expected, after seeing Tangjin fall silent, the young man's eyes trembled as he took the initiative to speak. "I've been able to sense some invisible elements in the air since I was young. They are usually arranged together in a very regular pattern, but once disturbed, they will instantly become a mess. When I left the room, I realized that something was wrong with my back. There was a chaotic elemental energy following me. However, I can't see anything unusual with my naked eye, so I'm sure that there's a guy who can make himself invisible and is following me from far behind. After the young man said these words in an indifferent tone, he looked at Tang Jin. Tell me your purpose. What's the reason for you to set your eyes on an unknown nobody like me? The young man's eyes were stubborn and calm, but it could not hide the slight trembling of his arms and his sleeves. After all, he was only a teenager. It was inevitable that he would be a little scared when he encountered such a thing that was beyond his common sense. For this young man to be able to do this much was already very good. A person with such a temperament definitely had the potential to become a formidable character. After knowing the reason why he was discovered, Tang Jin did not intend to beat around the bush with the young man and directly said, I want to work with you, be it cultivation resources, weapons, or even martial arts manuals, as long as you need it, I can provide it to you. The young man's eyes moved. He lowered his head and was silent for a moment. Only then did he raise his head and look at Tang Jin. There was a trace of determination in his eyes. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Since you want to cooperate and give me these things, what price do I have to pay? Very good, you are indeed a young man who understands the situation. I like it. Tang Jin smiled and said, I need all the information about Black Rock City. Whether it's public or secret, I want it all. And as long as you can provide valuable secret information, I can even pay you extra. What do you mean by valuable information? Be more specific. For example, the location of the treasure vault, the information of the building foundation, the information of the cultivators in Black Rock City, and so on. I need all of this information. The black-clothed youth was shocked when he heard this. He looked at Tang Jin with a cold and shocked expression, as if he was looking at an ambitious conspirator who wanted to overturn the city. At this moment, the young man's heart began to hesitate. Tang Jin's words were like a demonic voice as they softly sounded in his ear. Think about your dead parents, think about your sister who works hard for you all day, think about the enemy who killed your father and lived a life of luxury, and think about the classmate who bullied you and his lackey, Ying Luo. Shut up, don't say any more. The young man's eyes were crimson red. His wild beast-like eyes had condensed into needles as he stared intently at Tang Jin. Tang Jin did not bother about the young man who was about to explode. He merely continued to ask, so, what do you think? Let me remind you, my patience is limited. There was silence and more silence. Finally, the young man said, I'll work with you, but you have to show me your sincerity first, right? Very good, then tell me, Ying Luo, what do you want? Tang Jin was just like a devil that could lure one into the abyss. In the end, the young man obediently offered his soul. Brain beads, I want at least 1,000 brain beads. The young man's words caused Tang Jin's heart to twitch. Damn it, could it be that this bastard could see through my storage space? How did he know that I only had 1,000 brain beads left? These brain beads were specially left behind by Tang Jin in order to guard against unexpected needs. He didn't expect that they would come in handy at this time. There was naturally no room for hesitation at this moment. He had to let the young man see his rich and overbearing side. Therefore, Tang Jin did not hesitate to wave his hand. Immediately after, a leather bag appeared in the young man's hand out of thin air. Feeling the heavy feeling of the leather bag in his hand and personally witnessing the process of the leather bag appearing out of thin air, the young man's pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. He had already regarded Tang Jin as a super expert with terrifying strength. At this moment, the young man even felt some regret. He should not have agreed to cooperate with Tang Jin. However, when he thought of the various humiliations and unwillingness he had experienced in the past, the young man's originally wavering thoughts became firm again. He opened the bag and took a look. It was indeed a genuine level 1 brain ball. To the young man at this moment, this was a huge sum of money. I'll come back to you in a month's time. At that time, you'll have to give me all the information you've collected. If you complete the mission well, the reward I can give you will definitely be beyond your imagination. After saying this, Tang Jin directly activated the teleportation. After instantly being unable to sense Tang Jin's existence, the young man was once again shocked. After a moment of silence, the young man gritted his teeth and turned around to leave. 10 minutes later, Tang Jin once again appeared on the same spot. However, an inexplicable smile was lifted on the corner of his mouth. The cooperation with the young man was actually Tang Jin's spontaneous idea. However, after interacting with the young man, Tang Jin was filled with anticipation as to what kind of surprise the young man would bring him. This young man was not simple. He was unknown now only because his wings had not yet grown. Once he could grasp power, he would definitely become a figure. As for how high he could stand and how far he could go in the future, it was not something that Tang Jin needed to be concerned about. To Tang Jin, there were far too many secrets about Liu Cheng. This was his first time coming into contact with it, but he had already experienced many visual impacts. However, Tang Jin also knew that this was merely the surface. He believed that the higher-ups in power would definitely be keeping even more secrets. Since he wanted to build a city of his own, the more information he collected about this, the more beneficial it would be for him. Only by being careful and not doing anything unprepared would one be able to live longer. After pondering for a moment, Tang Jin turned his head and left. It had been a few days since he left Wanderer Town, and he wondered how Murong Ziyan, Qianlong, and the others were doing. Tang Jin knew that without his permission, they would not leave the small town and would wait for his return. Tang Jin thought as he walked. However, after walking for more than 10 minutes, he discovered that he seemed to be lost. 7 sit envelb/n. C/m for L test vels. This dark corridor seemed to be very long. He had walked for so long, but he had not reached the end at all. According to Tang Jin's visual estimation of the outer wall area of the Black Rock City, he was certain that there was definitely not such a long corridor inside. However, the corridor in front of him was really under his feet. After musing for a moment on the spot, Tang Jin once again took a step forward. However, this time around, he did not pay attention to the ground below his feet. He made a mark and paid attention to the details inside the corridor. Half an hour later, Tang Jin stopped his footsteps. A mocking smile appeared on his face. I really didn't expect that I would be tricked by that little guy and unknowingly led into such an interesting place. Tang Jin secretly sighed. However, he did not feel much anger in his heart. He only mocked himself. He did not even know that he had been tricked by the young man when he acted pretentiously in front of him. In the past half an hour, Tang Jin had been continuously walking forward. However, he did not show any signs of walking out of the corridor. It was as if this was an endless corridor that had no exit. From Tang Jin's point of view, this corridor was filled with strangeness. If he continued walking without an exit, he was afraid that it would drive a person with a weak heart crazy. If an ordinary person were to enter this place by mistake, he would definitely not be able to leave this place until the day he died. However, Tang Jin was different. Not only did he possess heaven-defying black technology, but he also had knowledge that far exceeded the natives of Liu Cheng. After the natives of the other world entered this corridor, they might not know what to do and might not know the strange principle behind it. However, Tang Jin had a faint guess. This corridor should be a Panlos staircase, or perhaps it could be called the Hanging Soul Stairs. Black Rock City was square in shape with a huge square in the middle. There were several floors of underground space below the building for planting and rearing crops. Ordinary floors had 4 staircases that were connected to each other, and they were connected from top to bottom to ensure that there was no obstruction. And this kind of architectural environment provided the best geographical conditions for the construction of the Panlos stairs. Perhaps the Panlos staircase was not built by Black Rock City, but appeared together with the tower after it was built. Morong Xian had also heard of Tangjin before. After every tower city was built, a strange place would appear. Strange things would often happen in that place. Therefore, such places were regarded as forbidden places by the residents of Luqing. Even the ruler of Luqing forbade the residents from approaching those places. The basic principle of the Panlos staircase was that there were 4 staircases in total, and the 4 corners were connected. However, each staircase went up, so it could be extended indefinitely. Walking up these stairs was equivalent to stepping into an endless loop, never finding the way out. In order to break this cycle, one had to jump out of this frame, or rather, destroy the walls on both sides of the staircase that guided people forward. Only then could one jump out of the Panlos staircase. Tangjin recalled the scene when he and the young man entered this corridor, but he discovered that he was unable to find any clues. Although the Panlos staircase was strange, a mere passageway was not enough to trap Tangjin. According to his previous methods, he had at least 2 ways to escape from this place. However, from the current situation, both methods had their drawbacks. The teleportation could take him away immediately, but when he came back, he would still be in the same place, so this method was not feasible. The short-distance teleportation on the map could also help him teleport to any place within 100 meters. However, from the current scene on the map, only the passage was shown, and the rest of the place was dark. He believed that this was definitely Liu Chang's strange ability, which blocked or messed up the map. Otherwise, the powerful map would not only show the image of the corridor. Tangjin didn't dare to teleport rashly. If the pitch-black place was high in the sky, Tangjin, who couldn't teleport continuously, would definitely fall from the sky and be smashed into meat paste. Therefore, this method could also be undesirable. However, in addition to these 2 simple and violent methods, Tangjin actually still had other means. First of all, he could choose to blast open an exit in the corridor. However, if he were to do so, he would easily attract the attention of the Black Rock City. If he were to meet an extremely powerful expert from the Black Rock City who could see through his quantum stealth light curtain, Tangjin would be in a dangerous situation. Or, he could use the data combat interface to scan and detect the corridor. The reason why the data battle interface was so expensive wasn't because it only had simple functions such as monitoring the user's body data and the weapon's condition. Instead, it had more than 20 powerful branch options. It was just that Tangjin had never used them. If an elite soldier were to possess such a powerful ability, they would instantly become a super soldier, capable of causing any enemy to tremble in fear. What Tangjin wanted to use now was an option on the data battle interface. The real-time mapping and imaging function of the terrain integrated radar, laser, ultrasonic, and other functions into one. It can map the geographical environment within a kilometer in an extremely short time and build a 4-dimensional holographic image. After he activated this option, lines of data immediately refreshed at the edge of Tangjin's eyes like a waterfall. At the same time, a clear 3-dimensional image formed by countless fine dots and lines gradually appeared in front of his eyes. A minute later, the detection ended, and the 4-dimensional holographic 3D image appeared in front of his eyes. With just a glance, Tangjin was sure that this was indeed a Panlos staircase. Tangjin carefully looked at the image once. After he confirmed his position, he slowly walked to the wall of a corridor not far away and stood still. There was a solid wall in front of him. When he threw a stone at it, there was an echo. When he touched it with his hand, it felt real, no different from the other walls of the corridor. However, Tangjin was certain that the real exit of the Panlos staircase was here. The results of the survey on the data battle interface were never wrong. In the entire tunnel, there was only a very fine gap on this wall, which happened to be a door. Tang Jin walked toward the wall with large strides. Even if he was about to touch the wall, he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. However, just as his nose was about to hit the wall, a magical thing happened. The image of the hard wall was still there, but Tang Jin felt that he had passed through an empty door. In the blink of an eye, Tang Jin realized that he had already left the Panlo staircase and walked to the corridor outside. He turned around and saw that the door where the soul ladder was hidden didn't look any different from the other places. Even the solid walls of the corridor had disappeared without a trace. This is indeed an interesting place. Tang Jin smiled. He stood up and walked out of Black Rock City. After leaving Black Rock City, Tang Jin headed to Wanderer Town. On the way back to the Wanderer Town, Tang Jin personally witnessed 7 scenes of cultivators fighting against corpse monsters. Black Rock City was the main force while the Wanderers were the support. From this, it seemed that Black Rock City had made up their mind. Both parties were ambitious. Black Rock City was the old overlord of this area. The Undead's goal was to conquer the entire world of towers, and Black Rock City was the first obstacle on their way to conquest. In the end, there would only be one ruler left in this area, so both sides would spare no effort to kill each other. Although the war caused the people to suffer, it also contained huge business opportunities. Could he do something in this area? When Tang Jin arrived at the Wanderer Town, he noticed that the number of wanderers entering and leaving the town had suddenly increased by several times. Occasionally, there were even 1 or 2 residents of Black Rock City mixed in. The entrance to Wanderer Town was in a mess. Fights would break out from time to time, but the 2 sides were still restrained, and no one died. Tang Jin asked around and found out that the residents of Black Rock City had just arrived here 2 days ago. They were mainly in charge of issuing missions to kill corpse monsters, counting the monster certificates brought back by the Wanderers, and giving out the corresponding rewards. This place was near the entrance of the Wanderer Town, and it was very lively. From time to time, wanderers, wild cultivators, and members of the exploration team would come over to hand in their missions. Then, they would choose the rewards they needed, be it food, or accumulate them to exchange for weapons and armor. Some wanderers with severely damaged weapons and armors would enter the town to repair them or change into new equipment. Compared to ordinary wanderers, these wanderers had more than enough funds to cultivate in the wild. At the very least, they wouldn't run out of food on a regular basis. Of course, these brains were exchanged with their lives. They might die in the wilderness one day. If they were lucky, they would have an intact corpse, and if they were unlucky, they would become food for monsters. Tang Jin stopped and watched for a moment before walking in the direction of the cave. From a distance, everything outside the cave looked normal. The little girl Murong Ziwa was squatting at the entrance of the cave, looking at the bugs on the ground. Beside her was a huge bear. The 2 of them pointed at the ground and laughed happily. "Little girls, what are you all looking at?" Tang Jin laughed and called out. "Brother Tang Jin, you're back." After the little girl saw Tang Jin, she immediately stood up and ran over with her arms and legs dancing. She was immediately hugged by Tang Jin. The big bear foolishly looked at Tang Jin. It seemed as if it also wanted to run over. However, it did not move. Instead, it had an expression of anticipation. Tang Jin looked at the drooling big bear. He then looked at the little girl who was also looking at him with her large, watery eyes. How could he not guess their thoughts? He reached behind him, and when he took it out, he was already holding a handful of exquisite candy. The colorful candy was very dazzling under the sun, as if it was emitting a holy light. The little girl and Big Bear immediately cheered when they saw this, and then took the candy to the side to carefully taste it. Murong Ziyan and Qianlong also heard the noise and walked out of the cave together. After seeing Tangjin, the two of them revealed an expression as if they were relieved of a heavy burden. Tangjin took a look and discovered that Dexiong and Qianlong's injuries were recovering quite well. For a wanderer, getting injured was a common occurrence. The two of them had good recovery abilities, and with Murong Ziyan's IV ointment, their recovery speed was even faster. "How is it? Are you feeling better?" Tangjin patted Qianlong's chest and asked in a concerned tone. "There's no problem. This small injury is nothing to me. I've already secretly inquired about it. That guy is the leader of a small exploration team and is very powerful, so if we want to take revenge on him, it's best to do it in secret." Qianlong smiled as he spoke to Tangjin. Don't worry, I know what to do. Let's not talk about this for now." Tangjin already had a plan on how to deal with the bearded man. Qianlong didn't say anything more when he saw Tangjin avoiding the topic. Murong Ziyan had been looking at Tangjin with a concerned look the whole time. When she saw Tangjin's eyes turn to her, she revealed a little girl's posture with a somewhat shy expression on her face. This time, Tangjin had bought quite a lot of things for the four of them. After greeting them, he took the bag that he was carrying as a cover into the cave and poured out the things for the four of them. The four of them were used to living a hard life, so how could they have seen so much food and clothes? The few of them had excited expressions on their faces. Qianlong and Murong Ziyan were still fine, but the little girl had already gone crazy with joy. She was holding a big bag of candy and jumping around on the ground. Big Bear was envious as he watched. He squatted there and drooled. Tangjin smiled when he saw this. He also took out a bag and handed it to Big Bear. The big guy immediately roared excitedly. His voice was extremely penetrating, causing pain in his eardrums. Tangjin was so angry that he kicked his butt. Murong Ziyan looked at the clothes and small items that Tangjin had given her and couldn't help but secretly smile. Her face was filled with joy and sweetness. "Brother Tang, where did you get these things?" Qianlong couldn't help but ask. Tangjin's body was filled with a sense of mystery, and this feeling only grew stronger as time passed. Even Qianlong, who knew his limits, couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. "It's not the time to tell you now, is it?" Tangjin smiled. "As long as you follow me, there's no mistake. Visit v3lb/n.cm for new OVL. Qianlong didn't mind Tangjin's perfunctory reply. He only lightly nodded his head before fiddling with the wolf-eye flashlight and military dagger that Tangjin had given him. His face was filled with joy. After distributing the things they had brought, Murong Ziyan went to prepare some food. Tangjin and Qianlong walked out of the cave and found a rock to sit down on. They began to discuss the things that had happened in the past few days. Tangjin listened to what had happened in the past few days and nodded gently while pondering in her heart. According to Thousand Dragon, the zombie horde this time was indeed different from the monsters in the past. Not only were they large in number, but they were also strong in combat and possessed simple intelligence. They were definitely not comparable to the monsters in the wilderness that only knew how to kill. The cultivators that Black Rock City had sent out had suffered heavy casualties, and the Wanderers had suffered even more. However, after paying a huge price, the number of zombie monsters did not decrease. On the contrary, it seemed to have increased. The stench of blood on the battlefield attracted more and more monsters from the wilderness. A few days ago, some Wanderers had even seen a level 5 black-winged blue dragon in the distance. It was said that the black-winged blue dragon was more than 20 meters long and usually lived in the dangerous wilderness. This time, it was attracted by the bloody smell. There was news that Black Rock City had already requested for reinforcements from the other cities, but it was still unclear if they would receive any reinforcements. On the other hand, wanderers from other places had been gathering over the past few days, with the intention of taking advantage of this opportunity to make a fortune from the war. The equipment of wanderers who died in battle, the brains of monsters, the rewards for missions, and the trade of resources were all good opportunities for wanderers to make a fortune. There were even a few mobile merchant teams that were heading towards Black Rock City, bringing with them a large amount of war supplies that were urgently needed. Tang Jin's eyes immediately lit up when he heard this. These wanderers from other places might be able to bring him a large amount of cash, gold, silver, and jewelry. Even if he didn't have these things, he could still start a department store wholesale and earn a large number of brain pearls from the hands of these wanderers. Tang Jin didn't tell Qianlong that he had a Lord-grade brain pearl. It wasn't that he didn't trust Qianlong, but the time wasn't right yet. He only told the 1,000 dragons to pay more attention to information about the foundation stones. At the same time, he also wanted to take advantage of the gathering of wanderers and wild cultivators in Black Rock City to recruit more reliable people. With the appearance of these undead, Tang Jin's desire to build a tower city became stronger and stronger. Perhaps the appearance of the corpse monster this time was a great opportunity for him. "Oh, didn't I say that I would give you a slingshot last time? Look, this is it." As Tang Jin spoke, he took out a slingshot from his pocket and handed it over. He had bought it from a store when he was shopping and had spent 100 yuan. The slingshot of today was very delicate. It was said that some thread-cutting technique was used, and it looked quite beautiful. Qianlong took it over and fiddled with it before asking, "This thing is pretty, but how should I use it?" Tang Jin took out a bunch of steel balls from his backpack. He placed one of the steel balls into the leather pocket of his slingshot, aimed, and shot. "It's simple to operate like this, right?" Qianlong took the slingshot and started fiddling with it. After a while, he said, "This thing is really not bad. Its power is also not bad. It is useless against large prey, but it is completely enough to hit birds." At this point, Qianlong seemed to have recalled something. He turned to Tang Jin and asked, "By the way, is it difficult to make this thing? I see that it's so exquisitely made, and it's also made of metal. It must be very expensive?" "It's not difficult to make this thing." "Why are you asking this?" Tang Jin shook his head. The Black Rock City's acquisition point has been buying pheasants and various birds for a long time to make dried meat. Some wanderers also rely on catching pheasants and various birds for a living, but the efficiency is very low. With this thing, we can increase the efficiency of the capture. After all, many wanderers can't afford bows and arrows. Tang Jin's eyes lit up when he heard this. He asked, "What's the price for buying pheasants in Black Rock City?" 1,000 dragons stated the price. It wasn't too high, far from the profit of selling weapons and other goods. When Tang Jin heard this, he temporarily put out his plan of reselling the white-striped chicken and raw meat. He would think about it in the future because there were meat worms in Black Rock City. It did not seem like there was a lack of meat. The two of them chatted for another hour or so before Murong Ziyan came over to invite them to dinner. Just as Tang Jin, Qianlong, and the others were discussing how to profit from this chaos, an earth-shaking roar came from the depths of the sinister and bloody Corpse Clan's wild building. A corpse monster lord in black armor slowly walked out of a hidden secret room. In the secret room behind it, there was a black stone covered with runes, floating steadily in the air above a stone platform. This black floating runestone was the wild building's cornerstone that Tang Jin had dreamed of. The corpse monster lord walked to a chair and slowly sat down. The aura on its body seemed to have changed. It was no longer as murderous as before, but now had a trace of King's aura, which made people feel a faint sense of fear. The corpse lord was silent for a while, then it raised its hands and looked at it, sighing. He's only at the early stage of level 7. The suppression of the laws of this world is indeed powerful. However, the more it's so, the more it proves that there's a huge secret hidden in this world. And one day, I'll get it. The corpse monster lord muttered to itself, and a moment later, its eyes revealed a look of hatred. If it wasn't for that damn ant, the clone I cultivated wouldn't have been destroyed, and my strength wouldn't have been limited to the 7th rank. Why would I use this trash's weak body? The corpse monster lord roared, but from the meaning of its words, it was obvious that the spirit brain corpse king had taken over this body. The spiritual brain corpse king roared and then regained its calm, but a thoughtful look appeared in its eyes. Although that damned ant was detestable, his teleportation ability was pretty good, to the point that even the great spirit brain corpse king was extremely interested. He wished that he could capture Tang Jin right now and turn him into a corpse slave to study. However, the current situation didn't allow it to act rashly. After all, it had consumed a lot of energy during this descent, and even its soul had been injured. If there were any accidents, it, the dignified corpse king, might be left here forever. Thinking up to this point, the spirit brain corpse king's hatred for Tang Jin deepened a bit, and its fists clenched until they made cracking sounds. Hiding behind the scenes and fighting steadily was the conquest plan set by the spiritual brain corpse king. This time, not only did the spirit brain corpse king's soul leave its body to descend, but it also brought the corpse race's origin stone. This was a mystical item that was similar to the building's foundation stone, yet far beyond it. There were only 3 origin stones of the corpse race, and he had brought the biggest one. It was said that this origin stone had the ability to create creatures on this plane and was the foundation of the corpse race's existence. As long as it existed, the corpse race would not be completely exterminated. When this origin stone of the undead clan was brought to the world of towers, the spirit brain corpse king had the ability to summon undead creatures from the undead clan. However, the creatures that it summoned were all walking corpses without souls. However, the spirit brain corpse king didn't care about this at all. The corpse race only existed for killing, as long as they could understand his orders. After thinking for a few hours, the spirit brain corpse king got up and walked into the secret room. At the same time, it opened its palm and revealed a crystal-clear crystal that seemed to contain the traces of life. This beautiful crystal was the origin stone of the corpse race. The spiritual brain corpse king slowly brought the origin stone close to the building's foundation stone. Then, the 2 magical stones slowly merged together and turned into a gray runestone. The spiritual brain corpse king closed its eyes and tried to use its soul to communicate with the runestone that had just been fused with it. Soon, a smile appeared at the corner of its mouth. At the same time, the thousands of brains piled around the stone platform disappeared in an instant. The outside world had suddenly changed. In the sky above the corpse clan's wild building, the originally clear sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds. Countless black mists spiraled and gathered, forming a huge ring of clouds that was dozens of meters wide. Follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. Bolts of lightning appeared near the cloud, making deafening rumbles. Then, it was as if a huge invisible force had torn the sky apart. A deep and dark passage appeared in the sky, which seemed to be connected to a terrifying world. Kakaka! A shrill cry rang out from the tunnel, and in the blink of an eye, a massive dark cloud surged out of it. It was only when the giant dark cloud got closer that they realized that it was actually countless black evil birds that were about 20 centimeters long. This black bird had vicious eyes, a pair of sharp claws that were always oozing blood, and a curved beak like an eagle. However, it contained a terrifying poison. Once bitten, one would be infected with this poison. This was a strange poison that could make people lose their ability to move and slowly stiffen to death. Corpses that died because of this poison were the only food for these death birds. In the world of the undead race, this kind of death bird went extinct due to the change in environment, but at this time it was summoned by the spiritual brain corpse king with the help of the origin stone. The death bird had not only inherited its terrifying abilities, but it had also evolved. Once infected with their poison, a human would die within a day, and the corpse would become a monster that only knew how to eat flesh and blood, which was the lowest level of the zombie race. And these death birds were only the first step in the Spirit Brain Corpse King's plan. That's all for this part, Trekkers. See you all in the next video.